Hey everyone and welcome back to the channel. So if you ever wanted to build a truly complex real-world application with Angular, ngrx and Firebase, then you are in the exact right place. Because today we are building the ultimate Jira clone from the ground up in one single video. We will cover everything starting from a secure user registration, then a persistent login session so you stay logged in on refresh, a real-time Kanban board with slick drag and drop feature, allowing user to create, edit, and delete tasks. Also, assigning tasks to other users. Then we will add a real-time commenting feature, and at the end, we will have our advanced filtering so you can choose between your tasks. And finally, we will secure our database and deploy it to the world, for which we will be using Firebase. Alright, let me show you exactly what we are building today. So as you can see, there is a login screen and we have got a register screen as well. So new users can register, for which they can write their name, their email and password. So we will start by creating a new user. We'll call the user Max and I'll call it max@gmail.com here, and we'll set a password like this. Once we register, you will see that we can see our beautiful Jira screen. So this is our Kanban board, and you can see even if I refresh it, we are still logged in. This is because of our persistence feature. Okay, so it doesn't matter how many times you refresh the page, the user should still be logged in. Perfect. Now let's explore the application. So we can create, edit, update and delete tasks. So let's start by creating a new task, and I'll call it my task here. I'll just write a description and I'll assign this task to myself, which is Max. Okay, I'll create the task here, and there you can see this is my task. Okay, I can even take this task and drop it to the in progress section. And if I click on it, you can see the details are already pre-filled. So it has got my title, my description and assigned to property. And when I click on this assign to property, you can see that it shows me all the users who are registered in the app. Okay, so I can assign this task to any of the users. For example, I can go here and assign to this geo user, and then I can also change the status to, for example, done, and I can even go here and add a comment as well. So I'll add a comment that I have assigned it to geo, and once I go here and I'll submit the comment first and I'll save the changes. So now you can see the task is in the done section. Once I click here, you can see the comments is there. It also mentions how many comments and the name of the person who wrote the comment and time and etc. You can also see the details have been changed successfully, and all of these things we are storing in our Firestore database here. Okay, perfect. So now let's see our other functionality, which is our two tabs. So we've got all tasks and my tasks. So it's a really common problem when users have a lot of tasks assigned to themselves or other people tasks. So they need to differentiate what are their tasks, right? So they can focus on them. So for that, we have got this my task. So as soon as we click here, you will see all the tasks are gone because currently this user wasn't assigned any task. But if I click here on all tasks and I go here and assign this task to myself, this one, right? And if I save the changes, now when I click on my task, you will see that I can see the task successfully. Perfect. Okay, so now if I go to another tab where I've already opened application as a different user, so I'll go here and I'll create a new task. Okay, so I'll say assign this to Max as well. So I'm giving a new task to Max here. Okay, and I'll give here as Max, you can see. So as soon as I create this task, you can see here suddenly the task appears. So in real time, we can see all the tasks appearing from one screen to another. So all the users get real time changes. So this is where it gets really cool. So whatever changes you are doing in one screen, all the changes you can see in other screen in real time. And that's all the major feature of our application. We can even go here and we can log out and we can register as a new user, or if we want, we can log in as the same user here as well. Perfect. So as you can see, there are a lot of features which have been used in this app. And all of these features have been fully secured using our Firestore database. And one more additional thing, we also allow only authorized user to go and delete those tasks. So for example, if this user, if he wants, he cannot go here and delete this task. Like you see, if he goes here and tries to delete it, you see the task come here again because this user didn't create it, neither he is assigned to this task. So that is how we have designed our Firebase rules, which you will also learn in this video. Also, no one can go here and edit this task until unless he is not assigned or reported to it. Okay, so that's all. These are all the features of our entire application. We will deploy everything using our Firebase hosting, and you will be able to see live here like this. Okay, where you can share it with your friends. Okay, so that is the end of this demo. Now let's continue with the video. So this is what we are building today. It is a monster tutorial, but I promise you, by the end of this video, you will have a portfolio worthy project and a deep practical understanding of how to build powerful scalable applications with Angular. So we have a lot to cover. So grab your favorite drink, open your editor, and let's get started. Alright, first things first, we need to lay the foundation of our application. So a great application like this needs a solid base. So this part is all about getting our project and our backend configured correctly before we even start writing any code. So our step one would be to set up our Firebase project. Okay, so we'll start on the backend and we will head over to the Firebase. So if we go here inside the Firebase, you can see we can go to the console, and once you go there, we can create a new project. So we'll say here, get started with a new Firebase project, and we will call our project like ngrx Jira clone app. Okay, so we'll say ngrx Jira clone app. There we go. We accept the Firebase terms, continue again, and enable. You can choose the location you want. We'll go with US, accept, and create project. Okay, so now it will start preparing our Firebase project. Perfect, so our Firebase project is ready. Click on continue. And now on the left hand side, you can see we have got our build section here. So what we need to do is we need to enable two of the services which we'll be using. First is our authentication. So inside this, you can see our authentication. We will be using it so that users can sign in and register. Okay, so we will go inside authentication and we will implement we'll cross this. Okay, and what we will do is we will implement our sign in method. Okay, now you can see we have got different kind of sign in methods through which we can log in the user. The one which we'll be using is our email and password. So we click here, we enable our email password, and this one is not necessary, so we save it here. So now this is the service which will handle our user registration, okay, and our login. Okay, so next thing which we need to do is inside the build menu here, you can see we have got Firestore database. Okay, so we need this because we will be storing all of the data of user, our Jira board, and all the other stuff inside this. So you can see the option here, create database, click here, and now you can choose the location you want like this. I'm just gonna go with the default one. Next, and for now I will start here in test mode. Okay, and once you click on create, it will create our Firestore database for us. And that is it. We are all set with our backend. There is nothing else we need to do in order to use this backend. Now we can go in our terminal and we can start creating our Angular project. Okay, so let's head over to our terminal and I'll go to my desktop here where I'll create the app, and I will name my Angular app here using my ngnew command. So I got ngnew and I've called my application ngrx Jira clone, and I'll just edit it to call it app like this. Okay, so I called my application ngrx Jira clone app standalone routing and will use styling as SCSS. Okay, now once we do this, it will install all the necessary dependencies we need in order to have our Angular project ready. So I'll do server side running as no. So now it will install all the npm packages we need. Once it has been done, we can install all the necessary dependencies we need. For example, our ngrx-store, our effect, our devtools, and all the other stuff. Okay, perfect. So as you can see, we have got our project here, which is ngrx Jira clone app. So I'll just open my VS Code, okay, and I'll drag and drop this folder inside this. So I'll take this folder, okay, and drag and drop. So our project is now loaded into our VS Code. You can open the terminal and we can do ng-serve here to see if our application is serving properly or not. So if I go to the localhost port 4200, you can see that our application is up and running. So now we will install all the libraries as I mentioned for our store, for our devtool, local storage, Firebase, and our Angular CDK. So here we'll install the libraries. So we have got for our ngrx store, for our effect, for our devtools, for our router, okay, our local storage, and for CDK we will be using our version 19. So we'll say CDK @19, and we need to also install our Angular Fire. So like this. Now this command will install all of these libraries. Okay. So we can say it is giving a problem for our this dependency. So we need to install Angular Fire version 19. Okay. So for the Fire version also we need to mention our version 19 like this. And now it should hopefully solve all the errors and it should install all the libraries we need. Okay. Perfect. So now you can see we have got all the libraries. So our ngrx store, our effects, our dev tools, our router. Okay. So these are the core libraries for state management, and our local storage we will use for our refreshing. Whenever user refresh, they don't want to lose the state. So for that we have installed this, our local storage library, this one. Okay. And Firebase library obviously because we'll be needing them to talk to our backend, and we are using Angular CDK. This one you see is specifically for our amazing drag and drop functionality, as I showed you, where we can drag and drop different tasks from one place to another. For that we will be using Angular CDK. So I've installed all the libraries close to my Angular version 19, so I do not get any errors. Okay, perfect. Now comes the next step, which is to configure our Angular and our Firebase. So we need to connect both of them, right? So for that, we will go into our Firebase project, okay, and this one. And here, if you see, we have got this settings tab. So inside this, we will go to our project setting, okay, and now we will go to our app section. So here you can see currently we do not have any app for it, so we will create an app like this. Again, I'll call this app as ngrx Jira clone app, okay. I'll take this as well. Now when I do register app, you can see it will create a Firebase SDK for me. So it just gives us the command to install it, and you can see we have got the whole Firebase SDK here. So what I'll do is I will copy this, okay, and if we go to our src, okay, inside this we will create a folder and we'll call it environments, okay, so like this. And now inside this we will create our new file, and this file we'll call our environment.ts. Perfect. So now inside this we can paste our keys, okay, so there. So you can see I have got my app ID here. I have got all the things we need for our project. So you can see the project ID, the name which I gave, okay, the API keys, which is the most important thing, okay. So just copy and paste this whole object, which is our Firebase config here. So here I'll create my export, I'll say constant, and this would be my environment, okay. Inside the object now, first I'll give a property, we'll say production, and this would be false. And after that I will have my Firebase object. So I have my Firebase object here, which will have all these properties as I mentioned. So I'll just take these properties from here and put it here, there. So there we go. So we have got an environment object, okay, and we have exported it so we can use it into other files. We've got production as false, then we've got all the Firebase property we need, okay. So now we'll go to our main file, which is our app.config.ts. This is the central place where we will set up our store, our effects, and our Firebase connection, which is the most important. This is a full stack application, so remember you do this part properly. So again, you can see inside the app, I have got my app.config.ts file there. Now here I will set up my Firebase, okay. Okay, so first thing I'll do is I'll format my document, okay. So I'll use Prettier here to format it so it looks better. Now I'll clear this, okay, and now we will start importing our Firebase and the other modules we need in this file, okay. Okay, so you can see we have already got our provide router, which is coming from Angular router. So similarly we'll use our provide store, then our provide effects, then our dev tools, and our outer store, our Firebase. So in order to use them like this, we need to import it. So I've already got the imports here. So you can see we have got our provide store, which is coming from ngrx store, effects, then our dev tools, then we have got our outer store and our outer reducer. We've got initialize app. All these things are coming from Firebase, okay. And then our get auth, provide auth. We'll be using all of this in order to use our Firebase features, okay. So now you import all of this like this, okay, and then you can start registering them. So we'll start with our provide store, okay, and inside this we will have our router, and we will call our router as router reducer like this. And later on we will be adding our all the reducers we will be creating, such as for our all the tasks, right, we will have, then for our authentication and so on. So similarly we will have our effects as well. So we'll have provide effects, as you can see, and effects we always put it into our arrow brackets like this. So we'll have our effects, for example, for our authentication and then for our task, as I mentioned for store, we will put them here. Okay, so these all things we will set up as we will progress into our application. Okay, then we will have our dev tools. So we'll have provide store dev tools. If you want to use dev tools for debugging and stuff, then you can have this one as well. Okay, and then we'll have our provide router store like this. Okay, and then we need something to connect our app to our Firebase. Okay, finally, which connects our front end to back end. So for that, we will be using provide Firebase app. Okay, so this function is from Firebase, open it like this, and inside it we call our initialize app. Okay, so this will be called every time our app is initialized. Here we'll use environment. So what we are doing, we are importing our environment, and we'll say environment.firebase. So basically we have imported our environment file here. Okay, and we are using the Firebase object, which is this one. So all of these properties, now we are loading it inside this. Okay, inside provide Firebase app. So this is the most important step. If it shows you any error, then you can write it down in the comment section and I can help you with it, because this is really required in order for your application to communicate with the backend. Okay, now we will have our provide auth in order to do our authentication. So here we'll open our arrow bracket and we'll use our get auth. So get auth, it's also provided from Firebase like this, and that's it. And then at the end we'll have our Firestore. So we'll say provide Firestore like this. Open our arrow bracket and we'll call our get Firestore method like this. And that's it. This is the most important part of our application, which is connecting and making sure the application runs how it should. So you save the changes. Okay, so I'll do ng-serve again. Okay, so my application, let's see if it's working properly or not. Perfect. So after doing all the configuration, our app is still working fine, which means we have done everything correctly. Now finally we can go and create a simple layout in our app component. So inside the HTML file, I'll remove all of this. Okay, and I'll have a basic structure. So as you can see, I have got a nav, okay, which says h1 ngrx Jira clone, and we have got a main which has our router outlet. So we need router outlet in order to display all of the components we will be creating later on. Okay, so now inside this, later on we will also have here our logout button. Okay, so we'll create a logout button here, which will be for a later part. Now inside our SCSS file, we'll have some basic styling. So here I've already got some predefined CSS, you can see. So we got a nav bar, display flags, justify, and just pretty much basic stuff. Okay, so that's it. We have done our basic foundation. Okay, so if we save it, and you can see that we have got our ngrx Jira clone app here. And with that, our part 1 is complete. So we have a running Angular app that is fully connected with our Angular Firebase backend. Okay, and we also set up ngrx, and so now we can manage our state as well. In the next part, we will build a complete user authentication flow from the UI to the state logic, and we will solve a very common problem, which is how to keep a user logged in even when they refresh the page. So I'll see you there. Welcome back. So in part 1, we laid the entire foundation for our application. We have Angular and Firebase connected, and ngrx is installed. So we are ready to go. So in this part, we are going to build one of the most critical features of any real-world app, which is a complete and secure authentication flow. We will allow our users to register with a name, email, and a password. We'll create a professional-looking UI for our login and register pages, and most importantly, we'll solve a classic web development problem, which is how to keep a user logged in even after they refresh the page using our state persistence. So let's dive in. So our first step is to define what authentication state means in our app. For that, we will turn to our ngrx. So for that, inside the src, inside the app, I'll create a new folder and I will call it store. And inside this, we'll have another folder, and that folder will be our auth. So it will have all the auth related files inside this. So first thing we need is our auth interface, right? So we'll create our auth model. We'll call it auth.modal.ts. Now we can define our authentication interface here. Okay, so what our data should look like. So I'll define the interface here, auth state. So it will have a UID of type string or null, email, is loading property, and an error property. Okay, perfect. So after this, we need 3 more essential files, which is our actions, our reducer, and our selector. So selectors for reading our state, reducer for handling our state, and actions for our events. Okay, so we will create our actions file first. Okay, so we'll say auth.actions.ts, and now inside this we will handle the different actions we can think of. So first thing we can think of is a login, right? And the other is our register, and the last is our logout. So I will define the actions here. So I'll say export constant. This would be auth actions, okay, like this. And for this, I'll be using my create action group, as this would be all actions of similar types. So I don't want to retype the code again and again. So I'll be using create action group. So now we'll have a source property here, okay, and this one would be the string, like what is it about, auth. Then we'll have our events. So the events property, as you can see. So inside this, we'll have all the different events we can think of, like login, login success, login failure, register, register success, and register failure, logout, and logout success. So I'll show you one of them, and then the rest I'll just copy and paste. So like this, we'll have our login, okay, and then we have our props. So in the props, when we want to log in, what do we send? We send an email and a password, right? These two fields. So we'll say email of type string, and we'll have our password. Password property again would be of type string. And after this, we have our arrow brackets like this, okay? And then this is our first action, which is our login action, okay? Whenever user wants to log in, this action is dispatched from our component. Now we'll have login success and our login failure. So like this, we'll have our login success and failure. Success would again, it will give us a UID from the backend, right? The Firebase, it will create a UID and we'll get this UID as a success. And obviously it will return us our email, because when we want to get the success data in our client side, right? We don't want the password. So we won't be receiving our password, okay? Only UID and email. These are the only fields we need. And for failure, we just receive our error string. So similarly, we'll have for register. But in register, if you remember, we have our name, our email, and our password. So name is the extra field we'll be passing, okay? So like this, we'll have our register here. So you can see we've got our props, which is name, our email, and our password. Also on register success, it gives us a UID, similarly as login and the email. And for register failure, we have got this. And the last is our logout. So for logout, we haven't got any props because we just want to log out, and similarly with success. So we've got this empty props, we'll just import it and the errors are gone. And this is just something we use the method because logout doesn't have any payload which we need to send, okay? So that's it. So we have got our logout, our register, and our login. Now we will define our reducer function, which will handle our state. So we'll call here auth.reducer.ts. I'm going a bit fast here because the application would be really long, but if you feel it's going fast, then you can slow down the video. Now for reducer, first thing we always do is define our initial state. So I'll say here export constant. This will be my initial state, okay? And this would be what? It's our auth state, right? This one. It is gonna be of this type. So we're gonna initialize this now, okay? So here we'll have our auth state like this. Open our object, and now we'll define our properties. So first we need to import this auth state, okay, like this. Now it will help us to define, see, UID, which will be of type null. Similarly, all the other properties will be of type null as well. So email null as well. Then we have our isLoading, right? So isLoading helps us to know if the data is loaded or not from the backend. So it would be false. Then our error property would be null. In the beginning, isLoading would be false because we're not loading anything. So when we start loading, we can change these properties to true or false. So like this. Now we can go and handle different actions. So here first we'll have export constant and we'll define our reducer. So we'll say auth reducer, okay? And this would be coming from create reducer as usual. And inside this, we'll define our initial state, the one which we just initialize here, this one. So we have our initial state. Now we can handle different actions. So we'll say on, and we need to have our auth actions. So we need to import our auth actions first, okay, in order to use them. So here we'll have import, this would be auth actions, okay, like this. So now we'll take these auth actions, okay, and we'll put here. So we will see on whatever action, what do we want to do. So we'll have auth action.login, and what I will do is I'll try to improve how we do ngrx. So before we would have like different on actions for our login, then for our register. But if you see for auth actions.login and register, it's pretty much same stuff, right? It returns like the same data. So what I'll do, I'll make them in one go. So I'll say auth actions.login and also for auth actions.register. Take both of them, right? Either of them, if it's the case, then take the state, okay, And what I want to do is I want to open the brackets here, and inside this I'll take the state like this, and the properties which are is loading, I will set it as true, because even if you are registering or even if you are logging, is loading would be true, right? And the error would be null for now, like this. Okay, so that's it. You see what I've done, I've reduced the code. So we're not writing our code again and again, which is code repetition. We are avoiding that. We're using 2 actions in one go. Okay, and we are handling our state. So you can see in the action what we've done. We've handled this login one and the register one, both of them. Okay, now similarly we will handle our login success and our register success as well. So I'll just copy this from here, and I'll have here this one on register auth actions dot login success. Okay, like this, and I will have the register success as well, like this. But this time with our state, if you see, we have 2 other properties, which is our UID and our email. You can see here in the action we have the UID and email, and here as well we've got UID and email, so we can use it together. Okay, so here I'm gonna take both of these payload. Okay, so here I'll pass the object, I'll pass UID, and I'll pass email. Perfect. Now we'll do same stuff. We'll have our state. Our is loading would be false because we have got a success at this point, so we're not loading anything. Our error would be null, and we'll have our 2 other properties now which we're getting from the backend, which is our UID and our email. So here I've got UID, and we'll have our email, like this. So that's it. That's how easy it is. And similarly for our failure as well, we'll have it. So I'll just go here and add our failure case. So we go auth actions.login failure dot register failure, and we take our error and fill the error property here. Is loading would be false. Okay, because obviously we got a response from the backend. And at the end we'll have our logout success. So here we'll have auth actions dot logout success. Okay, this one. Here we'll take our arrow bracket, and we don't want to do much. We just want to return our initial state, because user has logged out at this point, so it's going to start from the 0 again. Nothing is there, so we return our initial state. Okay, so making sure our user is effectively logged out. Okay, so that's it. We are actually done with our reducer file here. Now comes one of the most important file, which is our selectors, through which we can go and take different data of our state. So if we want our is loading, we can take that, or if we want to see if there are error, we can get, or our UID or email. So I'll create a file here, and I'll call it our selectors. So it would be auth.selectors.ts. So first thing which we need to do is we need to select the entire auth slice of our state. Okay, so we'll say here export constant, and this will be called select auth state. Okay, like this. And this is like a basic thing, like this is like a predefined thing we do always whenever we are defining our ngrx stuff, our selectors. So we create our feature selector like this, and we select our full auth state. So here we write auth state, so you see it's basically part of this. Okay, and then we give it a key. So here we'll define a key and we'll call it auth, like this. So here what we are doing is we are selecting the entire auth slice of our state. Okay, now we can go and derive whatever specific state we need. So if you see here on our auth state, what do we need? We need, like, if a user is logged in or not, we want to know. So for that we can see if the user has a UID or not. If the UID at a point, if it's not present, it means the user is not logged in, right? So we'll go here and define those selectors. So we'll say here export constant, and what we need, we want to know is user logged in or not. So we'll say select is logged in. Okay, and then we'll use create selector. So this time we want to get specific states and not the full state, so we'll use create selector. Okay, and we take the base state. So base state is our select auth state. Okay, this one, and then we can basically, it's like filtering, we can get whatever state we want from it. I'll show you. So we have a state like this, open our arrow bracket, and you can see we'll have access to whatever we want, like state dot, you can see we got email, error, is loading, and UID. So the one property we check if the user is logged in or not, we use the UID. If the UID is null, like it means the user is logged out or he never basically logged in. So we'll use this UID, and for that we'll use this double not sign here, like this. Okay, So this will give us a boolean from the state. Okay, so if a user is logged in, if they have a UID, if they don't have a UID, then it will give us a false, so we'll know. Okay, now after this we will go and we will select user details for our displaying. Okay, so here we'll have our export constant and we'll say select user. Here again we'll have our create selector like this. Inside this again we'll take our state, so we'll say select auth state, open our arrow bracket, take the state here, and now we'll define our user. So here we'll say UID, which will be basically state dot UID. Then we'll have other property, which is our email. This would be our state dot email. So what we have done is we have defined object here with these two properties, which we are getting from the ngrx store. Okay, and then after this we can even select, like, the current user UID. We would need this later on, because if we want to get like data for a specific user, then we'll be using this. So I'll create another selector, which will be called select current user ID. So what's the current user ID? Okay, because we'll need this later on, so I'm just creating it now. Create selector, and here again we'll take our auth state, take the state here, and I'll just store it. So state.uid like this. So I do not have to, I can just call this function later on, this selector, and get this anywhere in my application. Okay, perfect. So now we are done with our selector code. Now comes the part for persisting our auth state. Okay, so that the user stays logged in. So this is a key step for a great user experience. So for that we will go to our app config file. Okay, and here we will be importing our ngrx-store-localstorage. Okay, so this was the library which we installed to save our authentication state. So which means the user, whenever he refreshes the page, the app will remember if they were logged in or not. So I'll import the library which we installed. So here this will call local storage sync. Okay, this is the function basically which comes from this ngrx local storage. So here we'll have ngrx local storage, you can see. So now we'll use this local storage sync function to remember if our user is logged in or not. And then we also need to import our reducer, because this is where we are managing our state, right? So we are gonna basically link this reducer to this local storage and somehow remember it. So for that I need to import my reducer. So I'll say import auth reducer. Okay, so it comes from our auth.reducer file. Okay, now we take this and now we will define our meta reducer function. So this is the function which will handle the whole logic of selecting our state, keeping it in the browser so that the user is logged in. So here after this I'll have the function, and inside this, so you can see I've defined my function as local storage sync reducer. It takes the reducer, I'll import this, and so it's action reducer of type any. And now inside this, so as you can see it takes a reducer. So now we will return our function. So here we'll say return local storage sync. So you see this one, and inside this now we will define the properties. So we'll open the object, and now inside this we'll have multiple properties. So one of them is keys. So keys here we'll define is what state we specifically want to save. So if you remember in our auth selector here, you can see we defined this auth key, right? So here make sure this is same as what we write here. So here inside we need to write this key. So this will make sure that we only save our auth reducer and we do not focus on the other state. Okay, so if you, for example, you want to manage some other state as well, right, then you can mention it here, the one which you want to save when user refreshes the page. So for now I just want to focus on authentication, so I'll put my auth key here. Just make sure it's same as what we defined in our selector. So now after this we'll have a rehydrate property. So rehydrate is basically which makes sure that, you know, whenever you're refreshing, it basically repopulate with the data from the store. So we'll make it as true, and then here we will have our reducer. So we'll put reducer here like this, and that's it. That's pretty much sums up our this function. So after this we will define our meta reducer, and inside this the array we will have our local storage sync reducer. So here if we had, for example, another state if we wanted to save, we will put that here as well. And then we take this meta reducer, okay, and you see this provide store. So after this arrow bracket we put arrow bracket, and inside this we define our meta reducers like this. So you see how we are linking our store to this reducer, meta reducer, which basically handles this refreshing of our auth state. And while we are here, we can also register the auth reducer, this auth reducer, we need to register inside this store. So here we will take our auth and we will say our auth reducer like this. So similarly, whatever reducer we are going to be creating in our this application, we need to register them like this. So like router reducer, then we got auth reducer, then later on we will have our task board, right? So for that we'll have a task reducer, which we will also register like this. Okay, so you see it's pretty straightforward, but it's really powerful. We are telling ngrx, hey, for the auth part, which is this one, please save it to local storage and load it back up when the app starts. So it's a really important feature, but it's pretty easy to implement. Perfect. Next thing we need is a service to talk to our Firebase. So a critical part of this service will be to create a document in our users collection. So we'll have a users collection in our Firestore database, okay, right after whenever a user registers. So this is a really important step, as this is where we'll have all the users, right? So in the app, whenever someone wants to assign other users a task, they will get the list basically from this users collection, which we will be creating now. So we will go back, and here now we will create our auth service. Okay. So here inside the auth folder, we will create a new file and we'll call it authservice.ts. So auth.service.ts like this. Okay. Now here we'll define our class. So we'll call it auth service like this, and we will inject it in our root level like this, and we just need to import our inject from here. Okay, like this. So as you can see, it's an auth service. We would have different methods, right? So one of them would be login, another would be register. So we want to do these basic operations, which is login, register, and third would be our logout. So as we will be dealing with our Firebase, we need to inject Firebase and our auth as well. So here I will start. I will define my auth. So I'll say private auth of type auth. So it will come from our Angular Fire auth. Okay, like this. And we will say inject, and here we will inject our auth like this. There we go. So what we have done, we have injected this auth from our Firebase. Okay, like this. Now same way we will also inject our Firestore, because we are going to be storing everything in Firestore, right? So we need to inject that as well. So we'll say private Firestore. This would be of type Firestore. Okay, so you can see it's coming from Angular Firestore like this. Again we'll inject it, and here we'll have our Firestore in it like this. There we go. Okay, so now coming to our login method. So we'll define the login method. Okay, so now for login, if you remember, we have two things we need, which is our email and other is our password. Okay, like this. And here just for the type safety, I'll give email of type any, I'll give password of type any, like this. Okay, and then we will say return. Okay, and we'll use from rxjs like this, and inside this we will have our method. So Firebase provides us with a method called sign in with email and password. So with this we can directly sign in. So it will come, you can see this one coming from Angular Fire auth, this one. Okay, so sign in with email and password, and this field has three parameters, as you can see. One is our auth, okay, which we have here. The other is email and password. So we'll provide it like this. So we'll say this dot auth, the second is our email, right, and third is our password. So we have it from here, this method. Okay, like this. So that is it. With this method we can actually log in any user we want who's already registered. So now similarly we'll do for our register. So we'll define the register method here, and again this will also take our email and our password. Okay, so we'll have email and then we'll have our password. Okay, like this. Now inside this we will return again same stuff like how we did here, right? So we'll say return from, and now what we want to do this time, we don't want to sign in, this time we want to create our user, right? Because we are creating the user collection. So we'll say create user with email and password. So we'll use this method. So we'll say create user with email and password, this one. Okay, and now if you see inside this also takes like our auth, our email and our password. So we'll just pass it here, this dot auth, then our email and our password, and the errors would be gone. Easy as that. Okay, so this is done. Now comes our easiest method, which is our logout. So for logout we do not need to pass anything here. we can directly return. So we'll say return from, and Firebase provides us with a method, it's called sign out. So you can see it comes from here, sign out, and we just need to pass our auth reference. So like this, and that's how easy it is to log out. Okay, now comes the important method after this, which we will need for creating our users collection. So if you can see here, we will have a users collection, right? This users collection, as I mentioned, it's really important, and we will need this collection so we can assign different tasks to different users, right? So we will create this method. Basically, this method will create our users collection every time a user registers using our Firebase auth. So here I'll create, so I'll say create user document, okay, this one, like this, and inside this it will have some parameters. So one of them would be UID, which will be of type string, another would be email of type string, and it will have our name. So basically these stuffs would be there in our users collection. So name string like this. Okay, now we need to create this user document. Okay, so we need to create it into a specific path into our Firebase. So first we will create, so we'll say constant user doc ref. So we need to get a reference to where we are storing this user document. Okay, so we'll say doc, this comes from our Firestore, and inside this we'll pass our Firestore, this.firestore, this one. Okay, at this point we are dealing with our store. So like this, and we'll use backticks, and we'll go to our users collection, which we'll create, and we'll go $, and make this dynamic to this specific UID, which defines each user, okay, separately, like this. And now we need to have a data which we need to store at this path. So we'll say constant data, so we can call it user data. So we'll say constant user data, and this would be our object, and we can store UID in it, our email, and our name, like this. Perfect. Now we need to pass both of these together into our setDoc method. So this setDoc method is also provided by Firebase, through which it will set this document with this reference to this data. Okay, hope it makes sense. So here we will return, and we'll say from again, and here we will use setDoc method. So this one you see comes from Firestore. Take this, and we pass our user doc here, user doc ref, and we pass our data. So user data, the one which you created, this one. So that's it. We have created all of the methods we will be using. So make sure you create all of these methods, and after this your application should still be up and running as usual. Perfect. Now for the side effects, we will create our auth effects inside the auth folder, okay? And this auth effect, it will call this service and whatever method is required in order to deal with our backend. So first let's create our auth effect file. So here I will call it auth.effects.ts, and now inside this we will have different effects. So one of them would be our login, then we will have our register, right? And then we will have our logout. And then we can have some additional effects such as auth success. So whenever user has successfully logged in, we can redirect them to our board. So we can do that later on. So first we'll focus on these three effects, okay? So out of all this, the register effect is the most important, because this is the one where our user will actually be created, and for which we are using this create user document, this one. So let's get started with our effect file. So we'll define our auth effect class here, okay, like this, and we'll import our injectable. Okay. So first we will have our login effect here. So we'll have login, and for the effect we use this $. Okay. Now to use our login effect, we need to import some stuff here. So we need to have our actions, okay. So we'll inject them like this. Then we need to have our auth service. So this one our coming from auth.service, and then we have our router. So we need all of these bits in order to implement our effects, okay. And for actions also we'll import it like this. Okay, so starting with our login effect, so we'll have our create effect, okay, so equals to create effect, open our arrow bracket inside this, and then we'll say this dot actions, okay, and now we want a pipe, so we'll pipe, open our brackets. So now if you know, our effects only get called on whenever a specific action is dispatched. So for example, whenever any of this action is dispatched, we can call effect. So when do we want to call the login effect? When our login action is dispatched, which is this one, when user wants to log in, right? So we need to select that. So here we will select auth type. So auth type is what kind of action do we want to call this effect on. Okay, so this one would be our auth actions. So we will import our auth actions here as well. So we'll say auth actions like this. Okay, so it's coming. And now we'll say auth actions dot login. So whenever login action is dispatched, at that time only we want to call this effect. Okay, I hope that is clear. It's just basic logic for ngrx. So when this happens, then we will go here and then we will use our switch map. So we'll start writing our logic. So we'll have switch map, and inside this we'll take two properties. So this we are getting basically, okay, from our action data. So here we will have email, if you remember, and we receive our password, right, whenever user wants to log in. So we'll have our email and password, open our arrow bracket, and then what do we want to do with this data we're getting from our action here? This one, right? So I'll just show you the whole loop. So in our TS file, okay, from our front end, when user is trying to log in, he fills up these two fields, email and password. So we dispatch an action with those data from the front end. From the HTML we take, dispatch it. When that action is dispatched, it comes here. This effect is called. The data comes from here. We extract it using switch map, and then we call our service with this data, and then our service logs the user in. I hope that makes sense. So we'll say this dot auth service dot login method. You remember we created the login method inside our service. So if we go here, this you can see the login method. So this will go and sign us in. Easy, right? So here I'll say login, and if you know login takes these two fields, so this would be our email and our password. So this email and password, we are sending it here. Okay, so this service basically it returns us observable, right? So here we will use pipe. So we'll say pipe here, open our bracket, and inside this we'll use map. So to get the data, so here we will use user credential. So because it will give us a credential when the login is successful. So at that time we will pass our this action, which is our success, because it's successful, right? So we'll pass it here. So we'll say auth actions dot login success. There we go. And in our login success, if you remember this action, it has a UID and it has an email. Okay, so these two things, we do not get our password back. Okay, so remember this. So here we will have our UID first of all. So we'll say UID, and this would be equals to our user credential dot user dot, you can see it has our UID here. So this is the UID we are taking and filling it up in our login success here like this. Okay, and then we will have our email. So here we'll have email, and email would be similar, we'll get from our credential. So user credential dot user dot email. So you see a lot of other properties are there as well, like phone number and other stuff, but we need for now just email. So we'll get it, and that's it. So what we did, we talked to our service from the backend, it gave us a response, and we mapped that response and put our data in this success action. Okay, so we fill UID and our email with this user credential data, which is our user.uid and user.email there. And after this we will also do a basic validation. So we'll have a catch error. Okay, so by default if there's some problem, so we'll take the error, then we will call our off. So we'll take from rxjs, so in order to make it observable, and here we'll say auth actions dot login failure, because if for some reason login failure, then this will get called. Okay, if it catches the error. So we'll have our error here, and we'll say error dot message, we pass here like this, and that's it. We have written our login effect successfully. So this is how it works. So similarly we will define our register effect here. So register and with $sign like this, and we'll have our create effect, and inside this again open our arrow bracket, and this would be same bit. So actions dot pipe. Okay, and now we'll choose what kind of action we want to call this effect on. So we'll say auth actions dot, this should be on register, so we'll call this register, and this would be of type. Okay, like this. Now after this we'll call our switch map and get the data from our action. So we'll take switch map here, open our arrow bracket like this, and inside this we'll have the data we need, so which is the name for register, email and password. Okay, and now here we will call our service to register the user. So I'll say this dot auth service dot register, okay, and we will pass the data. So to register we need our email and our password, both of them like this, and here we'll pipe, and here we will chain our next operator, which is our merge map. So we'll use merge map here, because why we're doing it, because we're going to do multiple actions here. So I'm going to use merge map, and inside this, if you remember, so from this we're gonna get some credentials, right, from our auth service. So when we get those credentials from this, so we'll take those credentials here, like how we were doing before, right? So user credentials, and open my arrow bracket, and then we will call our auth service. So this time, remember, we created a method in auth service, which is to create our user document, right? This method, create user document. This actually takes the response data which we get. So basically this user credentials. So we pass inside this our user credentials dot user dot uid. Then we pass same way our email. So user credentials dot user dot email, and we pass our name like this. Okay. Now after this, we are gonna pipe again. So I can see it gets a bit complex, but we have to do all of this to make sure that our document is created, and then we only dispatch our final success action. Okay. So here we'll have a map, and inside that again arrow bracket, and here I will call my success. So here I'll say auth actions dot, and now I will say, okay, register success is done at this point. So I'll call my register success, and inside this I'll have my UID. So UID would be, you see in register success we have like this like UID email, right? So here I'll have UID, and UID will be this user credentials dot user dot UID, and then we have our email. So email would be our user credentials dot user dot email. Okay, there we go. And for this one here, we'll just put not like this, it will solve the error. And at this point, after this map, we'll put a comma, and we'll handle our other case as we always do, which is our catch error. So we'll catch error, we'll have an error, and write our failure action here. So off, and inside this we'll path auth actions dot, and we'll have our register failure, this one. And of course we'll do same here, we'll say error dot message. That's it. So there we go, we have our register effect as well. So if you look at it, first of all, we call this only on this specific action, which is our register. Then we use switch map to get all of the data from our this action, right, which is name, email, password we're getting from the front end. Then we call our service, and we call the register method so that we can register the user with only two things, which is email and password. Then once we do that, we pipe and use our merge map, because we want to do another action. So we get this user credential as a response of this one. Okay, then we use that credentials to create our user document, right? So for user document, we need to pass our UID, we need to pass our email, and we need to pass our name. So this is a whole user object we are making, and then we map, and we call our register success finally with these two data. Okay, but if there is an error case, then we handle it here like this. So that is it. That is how we handle our registering of the user. Now coming to logout. For logout, it's pretty easy. So we'll have logout, and again observable like this. We'll have create effect, open our arrow bracket, same stuff. We'll call our actions again. So actions.pipe. Okay, open our pipe here, and of type again here. So what kind of action do you wanna call? We'll say auth actions dot, and this would be our logout, this one. And then after this, we'll have a switch map, because we want to perform some side effects. So one of them is logging out the user. So we'll say this dot auth service dot logout. So like this, and once we call this logout, we will pipe on it. Okay, so the response we get, and then here we'll use the map, and inside this we'll open arrow bracket, and we'll pass our success. So we'll say auth actions dot logout success like this. Okay, and then after this we will have another operator. So we'll use tap operator. So I'll use tap here, because I want it to perform only one time. So I'll say tap, open arrow bracket. Inside this, what I want to do, I want to log out the user. So I want it to go to the main page, which is login. So I'll say this dot router dot navigate. So this one, and here I will have my square brackets, and I'll pass my login URL. So this one. So whenever this happens, user should be, first of all, they should have a logout success, and once they receive it, after that we want to redirect them to the login page. So that is our successful logout effect done. Now comes our auth success, which means whenever user has successfully registered or they have successfully logged in, either of the case, we want them to go to our main task board so they can see the whole Jira task and everything. So for that, we'll write this auth success. Okay, so here we'll have our auth success, again $. Here we'll have create effect, same stuff, open our arrow bracket. Inside this we'll say this dot actions dot pipe, and then we'll have our auth type again. Okay, so what kind of action do we want to call this effect on? So we'll say auth actions dot our login success, and then we will have our register success. So like this, auth actions dot register success. So whenever register or login success happen, that time only we want to call this effect. Okay, so we are doing both of them together in one go. So here we'll take our tab operator again, open our arrow bracket, and again use our router so that we can navigate the user. So we'll say this dot router dot navigate, again same stuff here, open our arrow bracket, and then we'll pass our link, which is to board. So /board like this. Okay, and in this case, as we are not dispatching any logout success or something like that, you know, if you're not dispatching any action, then we need to dispatch false. So here I'll just say here dispatch false, which means we're not dispatching anything in this specific effect. Perfect. So we are done with our effects file. So we have written our auth effect. Now we need to go and register this effect in our app config. So every time we write a effect or a reducer, we need to register them. So here you can see I'm gonna register this auth effect. Okay, like this. And that's it. That's how easy it is. So we have created our effect for authentication, and we have registered that effect here. Perfect. So now comes our UI for our login and for our register. Okay, so here I will go and I'll create the login and register components. So I'll do ngc auth login standalone and ngc auth register standalone. So this will create two components for me, and you can see here we have got our auth folder. So not in the store, this is our auth folder for the UI. So you can see we got login and our register. This is how the structure looks like currently. You can see. So we've got app, we've got auth, and we've got store. And in auth, we have got these two folders. Okay. And apart from that, we also need to make sure that our users cannot go to a specific page if they are not logged in. So they should only be allowed to go to a page only if they are logged in. So we need to define our auth guard as well. So here I'll define my auth guard. So ng guard auth. Okay. So it will create a auth guard inside the auth folder here. So it is asking me for specifically which one do I need. So I need can activate function. So I'll press space, and then once I press enter, it will create the files. And you can see inside the auth we have got this one, auth guard. So now we'll go to auth guard and we can define our function. So here we need to import our store because we will be needing our store and our router, both of them. First of all, I'll remove both of these bits, and then inside this here, after this, I'll inject my store and I'll inject the router. So we'll just import both of them here. Okay, and store we need to import as well, and same for router. Perfect. So now you can see we have got our store and our router injected. Now we can write the logic. So I'll say return, and I'll say store, okay, dot select. So what we want to do, we want to select the user and then know if he's logged in or not, right? So for that, if you remember, in our selectors, we have a select is logged in. So if you go here to our store inside the auth selector, you can see we have got this select is logged in. So this will let us know if the user is logged in or not. So we're just trying to get that here. Okay, so we'll say here select is logged in. So it will import it from our auth selectors. Okay, like this. So when we get this here, now we can pipe the data from it. So we'll pipe it and we'll use our take operator. So take one, because we only need to check this once. That is why I'm using this take operator. Once I do this, then I'll use my map operator and I will get the data, whatever we're getting, like a true false value, right? So I'll call it is logged in like this. Okay, open our arrow bracket, open the object, and now we can write the logic what we want to do. Okay, so we'll say if is logged in is true, at that point I want this to return true. Okay, which means you know what, that user is logged in and he can go wherever he want, like this. But if it is not the case, then we want to redirect the user to the login page. So we will say return router dot create URL tree, okay, and here we'll pass our login URL. So we'll say /login, okay, that's it. So here what will happen, for example, if a user is not logged in, right, and is trying to go to our dashboard. So for example, if a user, so here what will happen is, for example, if a user is not logged in, think of it, okay, and he's trying to access our task dashboard, so where the whole Jira board, he's trying to access that. At that point, he will be redirected back to our login because he's not authorized. And where we getting that from? Our store, using this select is logged in. Because if he's not logged in, then if you go into our selector, the UID wouldn't be there. So it means he's logged out and he's trying to do something which he's not supposed to. So that is how we use our auth guard. So now depending on whatever condition you want a user not to log in, you can write that logic here and redirect them to a specific page, okay? So now we will go to our app routes, okay? And we will implement this auth guard, the one which we created, right? So user doesn't log in, we will implement it here. So if a user is trying to access the login URL, right, then he will go to login component. If he's going to register URL, he'll go to register component, you know, all those basic bits. So I already got it here like this. So just the path, if he's login, he goes to this. If he's register, he goes to register component. And if he's trying to go to a path which is board, okay, /board, so which is basically our Jira board. So we call it Kanban board like this. Then he will go to this Kanban board component and we will create this component later on, don't worry. So I don't want the user to access this Kanban board, basically where the whole everything happens, like the management of tasks, assigning tasks, watching the task. So it's a private thing. So I only want logged in user. So that is why I have put here can activate auth guard. So this can activate property you can put wherever you want. If you have, for example, about section and you don't want user to go there, you only want registered and logged in user to go there, then you can put a can activate guard there and you can just write the auth guard. So like that, you can have multiple guards if you want. I only need authentication, so I made this. Then I've got this by default, like if a user enters this one, then he goes there and so on, okay? Perfect. So now we can go and we can define our login and our register component. So let's start with the login component. So inside the login component, our goal is to create a simple form which when we submit dispatches a login action to our store, okay? So we'll add the logic to show the loading state and display if there is any error. So here inside this, first we will inject our store, okay? Because we need to communicate with our store. So we'll say private store equals to inject, okay? And we'll inject our store like this. There we go. And now what we need to do is we need to define our form. Okay, so this will be the form which we will be submitting. So for login, if you know, we have taken our email and we take our password. Okay, so like this, and we will have a password field which will be empty as well in the beginning. So this will be our form fields for our login. Perfect. So now we need two more things. So first is if there is an error, then we need to get those errors from our selector, right? From our auth selectors. You can see this one we have in the store. So we have this error property, as you can see here in the model, this one. We have error and we have is loading. So we need to get both of these properties, okay? So here inside we will be getting our error and we will getting our is loading as well. So for that we need to declare both of these variables and we need to fill them from our store. So here I will have is loading, okay? And this will be observable, so we'll use a $sign and we'll define it of type observable. So this is loading would be a type boolean, right? So if it's loading or not, true or false. So we'll get a boolean and we'll say this dot store dot select. So we use selector. So for that we use select and now we'll get our select auth state. So this one, okay? And then once we get the data, then we'll use pipe, okay, to get the data. So inside the pipe we'll use map operator. And now we will get the loading state. So we'll say here loading state like this, and we'll open our arrow bracket and we'll say loading state dot, and we'll have is loading. So we'll get to know if is loading is true or false. So depending on that, we can show our data in the template here, okay? I hope that makes sense. So now similarly, we will also implement our error as well. So I'll just copy this bit here, okay? And we will have our, this one would be error field. So error, and error would be of type string or null, okay? Because it is not a boolean, it will be a message. So we'll be say it will be of type string or null. and this would be same again, select auth state, and here this time we will say what we are getting a error. So we'll say error message, okay, like this, and here we'll say error message dot, and now we'll get access to our this error. So whatever it is, the error message we will get, and then we can display the error message in our HTML. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Now obviously when we are submitting our form from the login, we will have on submit method, right? So we'll have the on submit method, and inside this method we will dispatch our action with these details. So this dot store dot dispatch, and inside the dispatch we will have our auth actions. So I'll say auth actions dot, and what do we want to do? We want to log in, so we'll dispatch our login action. So now if you remember the login here, the login action, it takes two fields. So you can see it takes an email and a password. So we have both of the fields coming from our HTML. Soon I'll show you how we get it from the form. So here we just need to pass both of these fields. So here I will open the object, and inside this we'll pass the email field, and here I'll say this dot email, and then we will have our password field. So password would be equals to this dot password, and like this you can see we have got our dispatch action ready. So with this logic we will be able to communicate with our store and make sure that our user logs in. Okay, so now in our HTML we can go and start writing the code. So as we'll be using ngModal and our forms and router, so we'll need to import them here. So we need to import them as well. So I'll go here and I'll quickly import all of them. So you can see the errors are gone. So we've got router link, forms module, and common module. Now we can go in the HTML and we can start implementing our template code. Perfect. Now I have already got some HTML written here, as you can see. So we have got an auth container here, we've got a form. Basically it has the ng submit method which calls basically this on submit, and which basically calls our this dispatch action for the login. Okay, hope that makes sense. And we've just got like some basic fields. So we've got divs, we've got label and input field for collecting our email. Similarly we have got for our password as well, and we are using ngModal so that we have two-way data binding here. Okay, so we get the email and password from here, these ones, as you can see. And of course we have got this div, so we are using our error observable, as you can see this one. Okay, so this error observable we have got, so we use our async pipe to load the data and we show it like this. And then we have got this button for our login button. Okay, so we show user login if our is loading is false. If our is loading is true, we show user logging in. It means, you know, he's already pressed it and now he's logging at the point. So here we are using this conditional operator depending on what our value is, like this. Okay, and of course we are using our disable property of the form, so that if the form is invalid, then we do not allow user to submit the form. And at the end we have got this div where we allow user to redirect to a different link, which is our register, if they haven't registered yet, because only if they registered they can log in. And for styling, I have already got some predefined styling, so I'll just paste it here. You can get all these stylings from the GitHub link, or you can copy and paste while I've got it on the screen like this. Okay, there. So now we are done with our login component. Similarly, we will also have our register component. Only difference is in our register component, we will dispatch our register action, and we will have a name field which will be an extra field. Okay, so we'll go into register component file. So inside the register component, as I mentioned, it will be same as our login. So I already got the register component code. You can see similarly we're injecting our store, and this time we have an extra field which is called name. Okay, so we are loading our is loading and error observables as usual. And then we have got the on submit. So this is the method which gets called when we want to submit our form. Okay, so this time you can see we dispatch our register action. So auth actions.register, and you can see it has the name field as well this time because we are registering the user. So we take name field using this dot name, and of course we've got our common module, forms, and our router link because we will be making use of ngModal forms, okay, in our HTML. So now if we go to our HTML, here I have got the code. So you can see for the HTML we have got pretty much same stuff. We are defining our ng submit here, which gets called whenever on submit is called. Okay, and here we have got the button for submitting our form, this one. And then this time we take three fields, you can see. So first we have got where we collect our name, then we collect the email as usual and our password. And for that, of course, we use ngModal, which is pretty much same stuff. Then after that we have got a div for displaying our error, and then we have got our register button. Okay, and then we show the text of the button depending on if the user is registering or still waiting to register, so like creating account or register. Okay, and after that we have got our div where if the user already have an account, then we want them to log in, so we redirect them back to our login component here using the login URL. Okay, so now after this we have got our SCSS, so which is exactly same as our login component. So even if you want, you can create a common file for both of these component and share them using our component code here. So you can share that file and you don't have to repeat the code if you want, but the styling is exactly same for both our login and our SCSS. Okay, with that our login and our register, so our full authentication is completed. So it's time to build the star of the show, which is our Kanban board. But before that, I want to show you if our authentication system is working or not. So for that, you can see we have got this error. So we'll create the Kanban board component and then we can test our authentication feature. Okay, so here I'll create this Kanban board component, as you can see. So here inside this, we will have the Kanban board as well, this one, and our error should be gone as well. So once we save it, and if we go to our app routes, and yeah, the error is gone here. So I think I just need to restart. Okay, there. So the error are gone. And if we go to our localhost 4200 this time, you can see we have got a beautiful login page here. But at this point, we are not logged in. So if you go here to our Firebase console in our authentication, you can see that we do not have any users. So I can go here and now I can register. There we go. So we have got a full name, email, and a password field. So I'll create a user and I'll call that user Geo. Okay, and I'll use this email and then a password. There we go. And now if I register now, you can see that it says create an account, and you can see we've got Kanban board works here, there. So now if I go in my Firebase and if I refresh here, so we did a successful register and we can similarly do our login as well. So now let's go back to our application and let's focus on creating this Kanban board component. Okay, so our goal in this section is to fetch a list of tasks from our Firestore database. Okay, so we'll have a collection called task, and from there we will fetch all of these tasks into our front end. So to display the task, as you can see, we will have three columns. First, our to do, our progress, and our done section. So we won't make it interactive just yet. The part is all about reading and displaying data correctly using our ngrx. So let's get started. So as always, our first step when adding a new feature is to think about the state. So we need to define what a task is in our application. And we need to set up the ngrx file to manage a list of those tasks, right? So our first step would be to create this task state slice, like how we did for our auth. We created an auth slice, right? As you can see in the auth model, we had this UID email is loading error. So similarly, we'll have a task state slice as well. So we'll create a new folder inside our store here. As you can see, we have got this auth, right? So similarly, we'll create a new folder and we will call it task. Okay, like this. And now inside this, we will add our model, our action, reducer, and our selectors. So first, we will start with our model. So I will call it task.model.ts. Okay. So this will define the shape of our task data. So we'll have an export interface and we'll call it tasks. Okay. So each task, how it should look like. So our task would look like this. So as you can see, we have got an ID of type string, a title, right? A task should have a title, then a description as well of type string, then the status. So depending on the status, it will be on a particular column. Like if we just assigned a task to someone, then it would be to do. If the user drags it to the in progress, then we'll define it as in progress, and finally as done. So a task status would be either one of them at a time. Then a reporter ID, okay, and then we'll have an assignee ID. So basically who we are assigning the task to, okay. So now we can go and we can define the shape of this state, okay. So we'll define our state. We'll say export interface and it would be our task state. So like this. And now for this, we will have task, right? So a user would have multiple tasks. So we'll have task of type task array total. And then as usual, we will have a is loading and a error property. So is loading like this, and this would be of type boolean, and we will have our error that would be of type string or null, like this. Perfect. Okay, next thing we need to do is we need to define our action file. So what kind of action would our task have? So I'll create a new file and I'll call it task.action. Okay, so task.actions.ts, like this. Okay, so for now I'll only have one action, which is our loading of the task, and then later on we'll focus on adding and updating of our task. Okay, so now let's start with the loading. So we'll define our action and we'll say export constant, and this would be our task action. So task actions, like this, and this would be create action. So we'll use create action group and we'll define all of them together. So like this, create action group, and now we'll write our source. So source is basically our string. This would be task, and then we will have our action events. So events, you can see it comes like this, and this would be object, and now we'll have all the events we need, such as load task success, and load task failure. So we'll have this load task here, like this, and when we want to load, our props would be empty, so we'll just pass empty props, like this. Okay, and then we will have our load task success. So load task success. Okay, so this is where we get a response from our backend call. Okay, and we receive array of task object. So here we'll pass the payload, so we'll have props, and here inside we will pass our task data. So we'll have task, and this would be of type task array. So like this, and we need to import our task object. So I'll import it, and as you can see, the error is gone. So similarly, we will have a load task failure as well, and for that we'll pass our error string. So after this, we have our load task failure, and it will have a payload of type error. Okay, there we go. Okay, now comes the brain of our state management, which is our reducer. So we'll create the new task file and we will call it task.reducer.ts, like this. So first thing we'll do is we'll define our initial state for the reducer. Okay, so this is basically state of our whole data. So here we'll have our initial state. So we'll say initial state, and this would be of type what? Of this model. Okay, this task state. So here we will have this of type task state, and we will import it. So we'll import it from our task model, and now we will initialize it. So you can see that it has different properties such as these ones. So we have got task, which would be empty array in the beginning, right? We have is loading as false, and then we have error as null. Okay, now we can go and we can define our reducer. So we'll call our reducer task reducer. So task reducer, like this. Okay, and obviously this will come from create reducer. So all of our reducer, our action, they all come from this create function. So you can see create action, create reducer, right? So we'll have create reducer like this here, and now inside this, first we will take is our initial state. So we'll load our initial state here, and then we will have different on functions for handling our action. So first we'll write on, and then we will handle our action. So we'll import our task actions, and first we want to handle our load task. So on load task, we will take the state. So this is pretty basic stuff. Open our arrow bracket, and we'll open our bracket, and inside the object we will take our state and change our is loading property. So at this point we have started the request to fetch the data. So here is loading would be set as true. Okay, and then we can use basically this state using our selector to show whatever we want in front end. So while the user is loading, we can show a spinner or something like that. So that is how we manage this. So similarly, we will have for our load task success and our load task failure. Okay, so now we'll have our on load task success action. So here we'll have task action dot load task success. So basically our reducer function, which is this function, it will listen for this specific action, which is load task success. Okay, and it will place all the fetch tasks we get from the backend into our state. So here now we'll take our state. Okay, and this time, as I said, we get our task, right? So we'll have task, okay, coming from our backend. So here we'll open our arrow bracket like this. We'll take our state and we will get our task. So here I will have task like this, and then is loading. At this point we are done, so we'll make it as false. Okay, and now similarly we will do for our load task failure as well. Okay, so here we can see we have got an error. So it says it doesn't exist. So we can go to our action and see what we have missed. Okay, so here you can see after this we'll have this round brackets. Okay, so now you can see the error is gone. That's it. And now we will define our load task failure. So there we go. So on task action.load task failure, this time we get our error. Okay, and then we pass error here, and obviously is loading as false. So that's it. We have done with our reducer file. Now we can finally create our selectors. So here we'll create a new file and we will call it task.selectors.ts. Okay, so selectors are basically they are memoize function which allow us to efficiently read data from the store. So we can create different kind of selectors. So one of the selectors like we can create is to get all of the tasks, okay, from the store. Okay, then we can create selectors, for example, to get our to-do task. And then we can create tasks, for example, the one which are in progress, and then finally for done. So like this, we can create selector to get whatever piece of information we need from our store. Okay, so first we will start by selecting the full task state, okay, like how we did for our auth. So here, as you can see in the auth selector, we did something like select auth state, right, to get the full state. Similarly, we'll do for our task. So here we will have export constant, and this would be our select task state, okay, like this. And again this would be same, so it would be coming from our create feature selector, this one, and here we will have our task state. So we'll pass our task state, okay, as you can see this one. Make sure you select this one coming from task.modal like this. So you can see basically if you hover over it, we've got task is loading and all the data. And here we will define our task key. So this would we will call it as task like this. Okay. So now come the part where we can actually define the selector. So first thing, what do we want to do? We want to select all the tasks there are. So for that we'll say export constant, and we want to say select all tasks, right? And here we'll use our create selector. Okay. So now what we are doing is we are going into our store and selecting specific data we need. So here we'll say select the task state, like full task state we have available, and then from that we will take our state. So like this, and we open our arrow bracket and we can select the state we want. So we'll say state.task. So you see this state.task is basically all the tasks we have in our store. So now using this selector in our component, we can load all of our tasks. So that's how powerful selectors are. So now we will create selectors for our to-do task, our in progress, and our done task. So if you remember in our task model, we have a property in the task object, which is our status. So we can filter task using the status. So if it's to do, then we will store it into one selector, then in progress, we can store into another, and same for done. So that is how we'll be doing it. So let's first of all select our all the tasks which are in to do section. Okay. So we'll say export constant select to do tasks. So these are the tasks which have just been assigned to a user and which are basically not been worked on. These are the new tasks. Okay. So here we'll say create selector. And what do we want to do? We want to go in this state, in this task basically, right? And we want to select specific task from it. So similarly we will do first, now we already have these selectors, right? So we'll use the derive selector. So we'll use this selector. Instead of going to it again, we will use this one, right? So we'll say select all tasks. And now what do we have at this point? We have the task. So we'll task, and then now we can filter the task we want. So we'll say task.filter. So here I'll go over each task, open my arrow bracket, and I'll say if task.status, basically this one. If it's equals to my to do, this one, then only store it basically, right? So it will store it inside this select to do task. That's how easy it is. So similarly, we'll have two more selectors, one for our select in progress task and another for our select done task. So like this, here we have got our other two selectors. So this one basically it filters tasks based on our in progress, and this one says task.status, which is equals to done. So that is how we are using our this one selector we created, this select all task, and we are using it everywhere to get the task we need. Okay, perfect. So now we are done with the important part, which is our selector as well. So now let's register this new state slice we created, which is this task, into our app config. how we did for our authentication. If you can see here, we registered our auth as well right here. So similarly, we will register our task as well. So here I will have task, okay, and I will say here task reducer. So do you see, once we register and do the whole path for one of the reducer or effect, then the other ones are pretty much same. So once you've written the boilerplate, the rest of the works is pretty easy. And now similarly, we will create our task effect as well. And then we will register our task effect here. Okay, so now let's go back to our task folder. So we will create our task service here inside the folder. So I'll call it task.service.ts. Now in this file, we will write the logic to get all the tasks from our database. So first thing, we'll have our class here, so task service, and we'll provide it into root, so it's available throughout our application. Now we need to inject our Firestore like this. That's it. So now we've injected our Firestore. Now only thing we'll focus right now is to get all the tasks. That's it. So we'll create a method called getTask like this. Okay. So this method, basically what it should return, that is what we write here. So it should be basically a observable, right? Observable of type task array. So here we'll have task. We'll import the task model. So task array like this. So this whenever this method is called, it should return a data which should be of type of our task array. Okay, like this. So now what we need to do, we need to contact our Firebase store and get all the task object there is. Okay, right now there isn't any because we haven't created, but we will write the code to do that. So if you see our Firestore database, you can see we have got a collection called users, right? So similarly, we will have a collection called task. So we want to tell Firebase that find that collection and get the data, basically all the tasks we will have. So going back here, I'll create a variable and I'll call it task collection. So like this, okay. And we will get it from our collection. So write collection and make sure to import it from Firestore like this. Okay. Now inside this, we will write our Firestore, which is this one. So this is the reference we'll pass, this.firestore. And what do we want to get? So because at this point we can get all the collection we have. So what we want to get, this task collection, which we will have soon when we create our first task. Okay. So here I'll write tasks. So this is the collection we want to access. So another advantage of this collection function is that it gives us a real-time observable stream of our tasks. So whenever the task is changes, it gives us the updated observable streams and the data changes in the front end in real time. So now here we will have written collection data like this. Inside this we'll have our task collection, this one. So we'll put task collection, and then here we'll have an object. As you can see, we need to pass the ID field, which will be of type ID. So here we'll have a ID field, and this will be this ID. Okay, like this. So here we can say this is as observable of type task array like this. Okay, so you can see the error are gone, and that is our complete get task method. That is all we need. Perfect. So this method is done now. Now let's create the ngrx effect that will connect our load task action, right? Whenever user want to load the task, it will connect that load task action to this new service method, which is get task. So we'll create a new file and we'll call it task-effect.ts. Okay. So task.effects.ts. So here we'll have our task effect class. So here we need to inject two things. First is our action observable and another is our task service, which we'll be dealing with. Perfect. Now we have access to both our service and our actions. So now let's create our first effect. So which is our load task effect. Okay, this one. Like this, we'll have observable and we are creating our effect. So we'll use create effect. Okay, open our arrow bracket. And inside this, we will have our this.actions.pipe. So we're gonna pipe because we'll be doing a lot of operation inside this. And inside this, we write the logic so that when do we want to call this specific effect? We want to only call this effect when our load task action is called, right? If that action is dispatched. So here we'll use of type. So what kind of action is dispatched? So we'll say when our task actions dot our load task, if this action is dispatched, then only we want to call this effect. Okay, so after this we'll use our switch map. Okay, open our arrow bracket, and inside this we will call our task service. Okay, so now we'll finally communicate and get the list of tasks from the backend. So we'll say this dot task service dot get task. So this will return us an array of tasks, so observable of task, right? So what we need to do, we need to pipe it. So when we pipe it, we map the data like this. Okay, so what do we get? We get our tasks, and here we can finally dispatch our success action. So here in the task action, you can see we have got load task success, basically which has this task, right? So now we can finally call this load task success action with the updated task from the backend. So here we'll have task actions dot load task success, and inside this we'll have our task object, which basically are all the tasks. Okay, like this. And if this is not the case, then we have our catch error as usual, where we pass our error property, open our arrow bracket, and we use of type to make it a observable string. Here we have task actions dot load task failure, and this time inside we pass our error message. So we say error dot message like this. Okay, so you can see the error is gone, and we have our first effect ready, which is our load task success. So when we get a successful data from our backend, when we call this service, right, and then only we pass this load task success, then basically this load task success, this action is called, this action updates our reducer. So in the reducer, this one, it updates our state, so it has the new updated task from the backend. Then using our selector, we can get whatever we need. So you can see in the selector here, we get our task, so we select all tasks from our state. So that is how the whole communication work between actions, reducers, selectors, effect, service, all of it. Okay, now we need to make sure we register this effect again as well in our app config. So every time we create an effect or reducer, we need to register it. So I'll go in the app config file, and we need to register our task effect. So after auth effect here, I'll have task effects. There we go. So we have registered it to the providers array, this one. Perfect. Now is the time to see something on the screen. So let's build our Jira board component and our task board component so that we can display the data. Okay, so we already created our Kanban board component before, as you can see here. So now we will create our task board component as well. So I'll go here and I'll run the ngc Kanban task card component. Okay, like this. So it will create a task card component here. There we go. So we'll have our each card information here, and this will basically be our parent page, acting as displaying all of the cards together. Okay, hope that makes sense. So let's set up the logic in our Kanban board component inside this. So first thing we'll do is we will inject our store so that we can talk to our store where we have all the data. So we'll use our selectors to get the data for our different column to get all the tasks. Okay, and then we can use actions to dispatch our loading of the task. So let's start by injecting the store here. So first we'll inject our store, we'll import it from Angular, and this one as well we'll import it from the store. Perfect. Okay, now if you remember, we have three sections. One is our to-do task, then we have our in progress task, and at the end we have our done task. So we need to create all of this. Okay, so here I'll have to-do task, okay, observable, and this would be of type observable of type task array. So here we'll have task array like this, and now we need to fill this up. So we'll be using our store selector. So we'll say this dot store dot select, and we need to select our select to do task selector. So this one, select to do task, this you can see it's coming from our task dot selectors, right? So if we go here, you can see we have got this select to do task, in progress, and done task. So we will go here, and for each of the observable, select to do task, we'll fill with to do task. Similarly for in progress task and our done task, we will get using select in progress and select done. Okay, so here we will have our in progress task and our done task as well. So only thing we need to import this selector as well, like this. There we go. So you can see we have got our to-do task, in progress and done task. So at this point we have all the data. If the data exists in our Firestore, then this would be filled up. Now comes the important part to start the process. So we need to implement our ng on init. So here we'll say implement on init, okay, like this. And here we will have ng on init method. Now inside this is the method which gets called every time our component is created or called. So what do we need to do? We need to dispatch our load task action so that our effect can get called. It can get the data from the backend, right, using the service, and fill the data in the store. And then obviously these selectors can get the data. So here we'll say this dot store dot dispatch this time, right? In dispatch we'll have our task actions. So you can see this one. And what are we gonna do? Load task like this. That's it. So at this point our component code is ready. We can remove these comments from here. Perfect. So we have written the logic for our Kanban board component. Right now we are keeping it simple just so that I can show you how it looks like. Okay. Now the task board component, as I said, this is a child component. For each task, like for each to-do task, each in progress and done task, we will show this task board component. So we need to write the logic for this. So for now this will be very simple. We'll just take an input variable and get the data from our Kanban board component. Okay. So here I will have the input property like this @input. Okay. And inside this I'll get a property. First I'll make it required as true, like the input needs to have it, and we'll call the property as task. Okay. So this one like this. That's it. So we are just taking our task data as the input property here. Okay. Now of course we need to pass this task property using our HTML so that this component can receive it. Okay. Perfect. So let's go to our Kanban board HTML component, which is this one, and we need to start writing our UI. Okay. So here we will do three things. First, we will set up our all the three columns. Okay, which is our to do, our in progress, and our column. Okay. And then we can use Angular pipes to load the data from these observables. Okay, all of these. So first I will have a div, okay, and inside this div I will have three things. So as I mentioned, our to do column, in progress, and our done column. So I'll have one div for our to do, and then I will have more divs as I mentioned for the other sections. So this one would be for our in progress section, and then we'll have another div for our done section. So all the tasks which have been done. Okay. Perfect. So now inside the first div, which is our to do, I'll have a heading and I'll call it to do. Okay, like this, and we'll have a class as well for our styling. So after this we'll have another div. So basically this is where we'll pass our task card component. So we need to pass the task card component here, okay, for each of the divs. Okay, and inside that we will get the data from our this to do and pass it so that this component can receive it. I hope that makes sense. So here I'll have the app task card like this. Okay, and you can see right now it's giving me an error because it is not a non-element. So we need to go in our component file, and in the import section we need to import these things. So we need common module, a task card component, okay, and we need the drag drop module because we will be using this for dragging and dropping our task from one column to another. Okay. So if we go to our HTML again, you can see that the error is gone. It is another error we are getting is the required property. You remember we made our task required as true in our this task component, right? That is it. We just need to provide it here. So here we need to provide this task, okay, to this component. So for that, if we go to our component, you can see we have got all of this, but they are array of tasks. So we need to loop through them and then provide it. So here we'll use our async pipe to do that, okay? So I'll use ng4 first of all, and inside that I'll say let task off, and we will loop over the task observable, so which is our to do task. So here we'll say to do task observable, and we can use async pipe with it. So I'll wrap it inside this like this, and here we'll use the async pipe like this. Perfect. Now after this we can pass this task property. So the input property is the task, right? So we pass it like this, and now we pass this each task into it. There we go. And now you can see the error has been gone. So I hope you know this bit. So whenever we are passing a property from one component to another like this, we pass it as input, and here we are passing it. So we are providing this task property. So make sure this name is same. So this task, and here we have got this input property, this task. So these are same. So we are receiving it here, okay? So we're passing this task property into this, and then we are receiving it in the component here. That's it. Now going back to here, we need to add one more thing. So these are all the Jira items, right, which we should be able to drag and drop. So we need to provide that as well. So here we will write CDK drag. You see this one. So now this will allow us to drag and drop our folders, basically these task items, from one column to another. And we need to provide more things, such as in our div, we need to provide this CDK drop list as well here, like this. There we go. And we need to provide the array of CDK drop list. So like this, CDK drop list data. You can see this one here. And inside this, again, we'll just pass this to do observable. So here we'll just paste it here, and we'll say basically if at the point, if this is not there, like if it's not filled up, then we'll say it can be also empty array as well. So there we go. So you can see what I have done. So we have got a h2 column where we have this app task component, right? The data is going from here to this task component, okay? So similarly, I will also do for our in progress and our done task as well. So there we go. So here what I've done, I've also given some classes for the styling. You can also copy it, or you can get it from the GitHub file. So I explain you what we have done. So I'll explain you what we have done. So we have set up 3 columns, as you can see, one for to do, then for in progress, and one for done column, okay? And we are using this async pipe with all of them, so that we do not have to subscribe to the data in the component and then load it. Using the async pipe, we can directly subscribe to our observable, okay? And then we are looping through all of the tasks, and then we are passing them using this task property to our child component, which is this task card component, okay? That is it. And of course we added the CDK drop list, and then we added the data, which is this done task. In this case it's in progress, and then here it's to do task. And with each task component we have passed this CDK drag property as well. Now we can go in our task component. So at this point we are getting this data in the task, right, for each of the section. Now we need to go in HTML, and we need to start writing this details for this task. So here I'll have a div, and I'll give it a class, and I will call it card container, like this. Inside this I will have a hash3 tag, okay? And now we will give it the description, which is our task.title. So you can see I have access to all the properties of this task. So we'll have task.title here, and then we will load our description as well for the task. And here I'll have a p tag, and here I will pass my description. So I'll say task.description, like this. So you can see how easy it is to get the data from our this component, where we are loading the data and then passing it to the other component using the details using @input property. So which is this. So we can just give some styling to these 2 tags as well. So like this, I've got this card container for this card title and card description. Okay, perfect. Now finally let's add some styling to make our board and our card, so both of these components look better. So let's add some styling. So we'll go to the SCSS file for the Jira board component, which is this one, and paste some styling. Perfect. So let's add some styling to our Kanban board and our task card component. So I'll go in the SCSS file and paste some styling here. So I've got this styling here, as you can see, for all of the classes which I have mentioned here inside this, okay? So you can get all of this styling from the GitHub link I will put in the video, okay? Or you can just see right now on the screen, like this. Perfect. So now let's do the styling for the task card component as well. So this one, there's a styling for this one, as you can see, like this. So if we save it, and then if we go to our application, you can see the application is up and running. Right now it's not interactive because our store doesn't have any collection, because we never added a task. So once we add our first task, which we'll do in the next part, then we will be able to successfully read data, update, delete, all of that using our ngrx store. So you can see the layout is super clean and it's organized. So next we will bring this board to life. We will add the ability to create, update and delete tasks. And we will also wire up the amazing drag and drop functionality, which already we have started implemented in the HTML section. Okay, Here you can see this one. So now we'll implement these as well in our TS. So let's get started with that. Perfect. So in this part, we are going to implement a full CRUD functionality. So create, read, update and delete task. Okay. So we'll build the model form to add and edit task. After that, we'll wire up the slick drag and drop function. After that, we will wire the drag and drop functionality using the Angular CDK. And as a final polish, we will make our task cards more informative by showing who a task is assigned to by creating a view model with ngrx selectors. So let's get into that. So our first step is to expand our ngrx state management so that it can handle all the new operations we want to perform. Basic CRUD operations, okay? So we'll start by opening our task action file. Inside this, we will create new actions. So currently we are handling actions for our loading of the task. Now we need to do similar for our adding, update and our delete, okay? So in our events object, we will keep adding more tasks. So first we will do for add, then we will do for update, and at the end we will do for delete, okay? So first we will have our message, so we'll call it add task, and it will take a payload, so we'll pass our payload using props, and here we will have the object, and the object should be the data of the task, right? So we'll call it task data, like this. And this should be basically of type task. But if you remember, when we add a object, at that time our task doesn't have an ID. We get our ID from the backend, from the Firebase. So at this point, this task shouldn't have the ID property in it, you see. But we have ID property. So what would we do is we would omit our task so that the ID property is optional, like it's not present, okay. So here what I will do, I will make this task of type omit. So I'll do omit, and what omit does is that it will remove one of the property or any of the property we want to remove. So here inside the task, I will take the property which I want to remove, basically omit. So I'm omitting this ID property from this task. So now when this add task, when it receives this task data, the ID property would be omitted from it, okay. I hope that makes sense. So now here we will have this brackets, and then we can go on to define our other tasks such as add task success, our add task failure. So when we have the success case, at that time we will have add task success, like this, the message. And this time the props, basically this is the data we are receiving from the backend, right? Then we are populating this action with that data. So this basically has the ID property which we get from the backend. So we can directly use the task object here. There we go. And obviously here we'll close it like this, and then at the end we'll have failure. So for our failure case, we have something like this. So we get an error of type string as usual, okay. And now we will do our update. So for update, as you already know how we do it, I'll just paste here and we'll go through it together. So for update task, we have a payload, so it is task, and this time we only pass the partial task property. So basically only the data of the task. For example, if you see, for example, if the user has only changed title and not description, then we would only pass this title, you know, and we won't pass the whole object. So that is why we use partial. And obviously we have to make sure whatever user changes, regardless, we pass the ID. So that is why we have passed using AND, we have passed the ID as string. And when we get the success, at that time also we receive it like this, task as partial, and again ID is there. Okay, so the ID is basically permanent. And of course for our task failure we get the error. Now similarly we will do for delete. And for delete, you can think whenever you want to delete a specific task, we need to get the task ID. So if you hover over the task, you can see that we have got this ID, right? So we just need the task ID to delete a task from the array of tasks. So here we have all the delete actions. So we have got delete task where we pass task ID, and success, basically we pass this task ID as well. And for failure, we get the error. Okay. So here you can see in the delete task success, here also we pass our task ID. It is because we can update our reducer using this task ID and update our store. Perfect. So now we are done with whole of our actions file. Now we can go in our service and implement the methods we need in order to implement these actions. For example, our adding of the task, then our deleting, right? And even our updating of the task. So we need to create all of these three methods, which will basically communicate with our Firestore and give us the data. So first let's add our add task method. So here we'll have the add task method, and in the add task method, you remember we have the task data object, right? So task data, this one, and this is of type omit, right? So omit, we pass our task but without the id. So here we'll have the task, as you can see, and we pass our id as well, like this here. So basically we are omitting our id from this task, okay? But the data which we will receive here, this would be observable. So we'll have observable, and this would be of type document reference. So this is what Firebase gives us, okay? So we'll just get it like this. And inside this, we will return the method so that we can add this document, this task data, to our collection. Which collection? This task collection. So here what we'll do is we'll make it global, so that because we need to access it again and again in all of these methods. So I'll remove it from here and I'll put it here, and then we can access it using this. There we go. And we do not need a constant here. This would be private, like this. Perfect. So now here also we will add basically this document to this task collection, okay? This one. Okay, so now we'll say return from, okay, and inside this we will have our add doc method. So you can see add doc. So it comes from this Firestore fire, okay, this one. Now we just need to pass our collection. So this dot task collection, this is where we want to add. And what do we want to add? We want to add this task data. That's it. That is how easy it is to add a task using Firebase. Now similarly we will have for our update, and then at the end we will do our delete. So we will call it update task method here, okay, like this. And so similarly how we did here, we passed a type omit. This time we will pass a type partial, because we want to only send the part which have been changed, okay? So here we'll pass our updated task. So we'll say task update, okay, and this should be of type partial. And what do we want to take partial for? Our task property. And what do we want to make sure? Regardless of whatever we are changing, we need to make sure that we are always passing our id, so that it can go and recognize what does it need to change. So it needs the id, right? Like this. And this should be of type observable, of type void here, okay, like this. And inside this we will be returning our updated task object. So first we need to create a doc ref. So what does it mean? So basically we need to find where do we exactly need to go in our Firestore. For example, if we go here and we have our task collection here, we need to find specific which doc do we need to update, right? So we need to find that first. So here we will say task doc ref, and this would be doc. So this doc comes from this Firestore, and now we will be finding it. So we'll say this dot Firestore, and now inside this we want to go to a path. So we'll say go to the task collection, and there we will make the part dynamic. So now we will be passing this id we are getting. So here we will pass our task update dot id. So you can see the id, okay? So now what this will do is basically this bit, this will go to this doc, okay? For example, when we have task, it will go to this doc, find this doc with the specific id we are passing, this task update dot id, and store the reference of it inside this, okay? Then we can update our Firestore. So here we'll say return from, as usual, and now here we will have our update doc. So Firestore provides us with all of this method to update a doc, okay? So here we'll use this one, update doc, and inside this we can pass the reference. So reference is task doc ref, and we can pass the data. So data is this task update. There we go. So now you can see the errors are gone. And similarly we will also have for our delete task, and that is it. You can see the errors are gone and we have our application running again. Perfect. We have created all the 4 methods we need: get, add, update, and delete. So now we can create the corresponding effects file in our task effect. Basically this will listen for our new actions, then they will call the service and dispatch the success or failure and update our state. So now let's get started with our add effect. We'll call it add task, okay, followed by $. And similarly this would be also coming from our create effect, like our load task, how we did. Open our arrow bracket, and now inside this we will have our of type. So when do we want to call this effect? So we want to call this when our task action dot add task is called, okay? So here we'll have of type, and inside this we'll have when task actions dot add task. If this is called, then only we want to call this effect. So when we want to add the task, that time we'll take switch map and we'll get the data. So inside this we'll have our task data object. So this is the data we want to add, right? So here we'll have task data, open our arrow bracket, and inside this we will pass our service. So service to actually add our task. So we'll say this dot task service dot add task, and inside this basically we pass this task data, okay? And when we pass this, you remember it returns an observable, so we will pipe to it. So the service basically returns an observable from the backend, and then we pipe the data, okay? And inside this we finally update our add task success, okay? So here we will call the map, and the map will have this docref. As I mentioned you, in our task service for the adding we receive this document reference. So we will go here and then receive this docref here in the map, okay? So here we'll put it inside the arrow bracket and we'll put it like this, and now we will call our success. So we'll say task actions dot add task success. So add task success, and if you remember what it takes the task, right? So this is what we receive from our backend. So here we will pass this task, okay, and we'll open our object, we'll take the task data, so like this task data, and we'll pass the ID, and ID would be equals to our docref dot, you can see we have got so many stuff, like, so we'll take the ID from here like this. So now our task data, which didn't have an ID, now we got ID from the backend. So basically from this docref, and we have populated it. So we took using this dot 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 task data and we updated our ID. Perfect. And if this is not the case, then we obviously handle our catch error as usual. Inside we have the error property, open our arrow bracket, and we pass our failure. So here we have off, and this would be task actions dot our add task failure, this one. And here we pass the error, so that we pass as a message. So we say error dot message as usual, like this. There we go. And here I can see I've got the error in create effect because you see I'm missing this bit. So this dot actions dot pipe. So whenever we call our effect, it has to be inside this. So here we need to write this dot actions dot pipe, and we need to close it with this. And we're gonna take all of this data and put it inside this there. So you can see that it has solved our error. So I'll just format the document. Okay, perfect. So similarly, after this, we will have for our update and our delete task as well. So they will be exactly same as those, only the calls would be changed. So here I've got the update and I've got the delete task. So you can see for update task, we have got task actions dot update task. We get the task because when we are updating, we have the whole task object. Then we call our task service update task method, okay? We take the task there and we pass our update task success like this. For delete, we take the task ID, okay, like this, and we in the success we pass this task ID. So you can see all of the methods are exactly same. So this is what ngrx provides us with. The boilerplate code is exactly same. Only things we have to change are the method names, okay? And now we can go to the final part, which is our reducer. So now we need to handle all of these success states, right? So whenever we get a success response from the backend and we pass this updated data, right? Then we need to go in reducer and handle our state. So basically update our task, or if you want to delete a task, then we pass this delete task success. We need to go and actually delete it from our store. So all this stuff we will be doing in our reducer. So now let's go in our task reducer file and update these bits. Okay, so here after this, we will create our update task success, add task success, and the failure for all of them. Okay, so now here we will have on, and we will say task actions dot add task success. Okay, this one. So here we take our state now, and we take the task which we need to add. So we'll take the task like this, and we'll open our arrow bracket, and inside this we will update our task. So here we'll take the state and we will go to all the tasks. So we have this task array, and now we'll go to the specific task we need to add. So we will take all the tasks. So we'll say state.task, okay, and add this new task which we are passing, which is this one. So this task now have the ID in it. You have to understand that, right? because we got it from the backend. So now we have updated our local state by passing this reducer. Okay. Now similarly we will have for our update task success as well. So after this I'll have on, and this would be task actions dot update task success. So now we already had the task. What we are doing is we are updating some properties of it, or full object for example. So we take the state and we take the task object which we already have, open our arrow bracket, and inside this we do the same stuff. So we take our state and we will take all of our tasks. Okay. And this time what we need to do is we need to find the specific task we need to update from the whole list of tasks. So here we'll say state dot task dot map. Okay, so we can loop over all the tasks. So here I'll say each task I'll call T like this, and I'll say if, I'll put a condition here. Okay, so I'll open my arrow bracket and I'll say here if t.id, basically if the task.id, if it is equals to the task which we are getting from the backend, like this one, right? So if it equals to this task.id, then it is the one which you want to update, right? Basically. So then what we will do is in this point we'll use our ternary operator and we'll say take the task basically and update it with this specific task. So like this. Okay. And if it is not the case, then we want to just keep it as usual. Now after this we can handle our delete task success as well. So I'll just copy this one here and I'll paste. So this one would be on delete task success, and this time we pass our task ID. So I'll pass here task ID, and if you'll think where I'm getting all this from, so this is coming from our actions. So in our actions we define what do we want to do. So you can say success, we pass the task ID, right? Like this. So now here we have the task ID, and this on is giving error because we need to put a comma here. Perfect. Now what do? We again take our state, and this time we need to filter. So I'll say state.task.filter. So what we'll do is we will return all the tasks specifically which doesn't match to this. So then basically this would be filtered out, or you can say it's deleted. So now here we will say take the task, okay, and open arrow bracket and say if t.id, this one, if it is not equals to the task ID. So if it is not the case, then return all of it. So basically the one which you want to delete, this will be equals to this and it won't be returned, right? And we will get our updated task list. So that is it. And now for our error handling, we have our failure cases. So for our add task failure, then our delete task failure, and our update task failure. So for those, what we are doing is just we are updating our error object. So I will write all of them into one. So like this, we have got on task action.add task failure, update task failure, delete task failure. We take the error and we take the state and update our error like this. Perfect. Now we have done all of the CRUD operations we need, and we can perform our full CRUD operations using ngrx state management. So now let's build the UI. Now our next step is to build the model form that will allow us to create and edit the task. Okay. But before we build the form itself, we need to think about one of its key feature, which is the assign to dropdown. As you can see here, when we click on this, it populates all the users which are registered, right? So this is the perfect use case for adding another slice of state in our ngrx store. So as you can see in our ngrx store currently, we added an authentication, then we added a task. Now we will add a new state slice which will be our users. So we are going to build the complete state management flow for fetching and holding a list of all users in our app. Okay, so this process will be very similar to how we set up our task state. Okay, so all of these files. So similarly, inside the store here, we'll create a new folder and we will call it users. Okay, so this users basically, it will have all the users which are registered in our app. So first, let's create our user model. So how our user object should look like. So we are going to be defining our model. So the file we will call it users.model.ts. Okay. Now we will define our user object and also the shape of our state. So what our user state should look like. So our user object would look like this. So it will have a UID, an email, and a name. Okay, like this. So you can see when we created our user, right? When we registered, we created this users collection. So you can see we have got email, name, and UID like this. So now we will define our user state as well, because we are adding it as a slice, right? ngrx slice. So we are going to be having a state for it. So we'll say export interface, and we will call it user state. So users state. So if you have seen, for all of the state we have created, for example, for our task, we created this, okay, the task state. For our authentication, we had this auth state, okay, this one. So similarly, now we are creating our user state as well here. So we will have these users which will be of type users array. So we'll have users of type user array like this. Then we will have is loading, okay, as usual this would be of type boolean, and we will have our error property which will be of type string or null. Perfect. So next is our action file. So here I'll create a new file and I'll call it users.actions.ts. So this action file would be the easiest file because here we will have just the actions related to our loading of the user. So we'll have a loading, we'll have loading success and a loading failure. So our file would look something like this. So we have got an action group where we have got our 3 events. So first is load users, where we do not pass any payload. Then we have our load user success. So this is what we receive from the backend. So we get users of type user array, basically this one, okay. Then we have our load user failures where we have the error. That is it. Now comes the reducer bit. So here we'll create a new file and we will call it users.reducer.ts like this. So now here, as usual, we will define our initial state. So we'll have initial state of user state, which we will import like this. So users would be empty in the beginning, is loading as false, and error as null. Okay, now we will define our user reducer. So we'll have export constant and we will call it users reducer. So like this. So here we'll have create reducer. And inside this, we'll have our initial state. So basically this initial state, okay. And then what we will do, we'll have different on handle to handle our actions. So first action we want to handle is load the user, which is this one. Then we will do our success and failure. Perfect. So as this is pretty easy, I've already got it here. As you can see, we have got our user actions, which we need to import. So I'll just import it. Okay, so the basic action is when we load our user. At that time, we make is loading as true, okay? And on the success, we take our state and we update the users from what we are getting from the backend, basically these ones, right? And we will get it using our service, which we will create now. Okay. And when the user fails, we have got is loading as false and we pass our error data, which is this one. And finally, we need the selector, which will give our component a way to read the list of users from the store. Okay. So now let's create our selectors. So here I'll create a new file and I will call it users.selectors.ts like this. Perfect. So now we need to create our state slice for our users as well, how we have done for all of them. So we'll call it users, okay. So there we have our select user state. So we select the full state of our users, okay. So this is the user state and you can see we have access to users, is loading error, and we give it a key and we call it users, okay. Now we're gonna define our select all users. So our selector function, we'll call it select all users. So with this, now we will have access to all the users which are in our store. So here we'll say create selector, and inside this, what we'll do, first we'll select the full state. So using this selector, and then we will take the state, open our arrow bracket, and we'll say get me all the users which are there like this. So now we have access to all the users. So now I can take this selector, okay, and load this selector into the component where I want to load the whole list of users, okay. Perfect. So now one last thing left is we need to register this new state slice we created users into our config file. So here inside this, how we registered our router, auth, and task, we need to register our users as well. So users, and this would be users reducer like this. Perfect. So now we have our reducer registered in our store. Now comes the part of registering our user service and its effect. So I'll go back to my users folder here, and now we will create our user service, okay. So inside this, I'll create a new file and I will call it users.service.ts. Now this service will basically talk to our backend and get us all the users we need, okay. And this process would be exactly same like how we got our task, right? So if you see here, we got the task using this collection data. So similarly, we will get our users too. So here we have got this code. As you can see, we have created the user service class. We're injecting our Firestore as usual, and we've got the get users method, which basically returns this array of users. Okay, so we get our user collection using this collection method. We go to Firestore users collection, this one. Okay, and then basically if we click here, we can see all the details. So here you can see we return it as the collection data. So all the user collection from basically these users. Okay, so array of users. Okay, so I hope you understood the pattern. So next thing we'll do is our effect file. So here we'll create a new file and we will call it user effects. So this would be users.effects.ts. We'll create an effect. Okay, so basically load users effect, this one. Okay, so as you can see, first we have injected our action and user service. So I'll show you exactly how this works. So on the UI, when user clicks on the drop down to assign a user, at that time we call the action. So we call this load dispatch action. Okay, load users, this one. Because of this, our this effect will get triggered. Okay, so from here this effect get triggered. Okay, then we using switch map, we call our service. We get all the users from our backend, which is this one. Okay, our service returns array of users, which we take here, and we pass it to the load user success, this one. Okay, and then because of this load user success, if we go to our reducer, you can see we update our users with the updated users from backend, and then using the selector we get those users. Easy as that. So that is how your whole effect code actually works. Okay, and of course we have got our catch error. For some reason, if there is a problem, then we load, instead of this we load our load user failure with the specific message. Perfect. So finally, as we registered our reducer, we also need to register our effect. So this load user effect we need to register. So inside the config file, I'll go here, and after the task effect, we'll register our users effect as well. These ones. Okay. If we save it, you can see the errors are gone, and now our application has a complete reusable system for fetching and storing list of all users. Okay, so with this foundation in place, we are now fully prepared to build our add edit task model. So we will create a single reusable and professional looking model component, so which can be used for both adding brand new tasks and also the editing the existing ones. So the first thing we need to do is we need to generate the component file itself. So here we will go and we will create this add edit task component. Okay, so here we'll run the command ngc and we will call our component add edit task, and we will create it inside this Kanban folder. So this one. Okay, this will be standalone component as usual, and now you can see we have got the add edit task component here. Perfect. So let's go in the component file. Okay, and now we will start implementing our features. So now this component will perform two operations. One is add, another is edit. Now how do we differentiate what does our component need to do? Does it need to add or edit the task? So for that we will be taking an existing task as an input property. Okay, so for that we'll just import our input property here, and we need to import our task object as well. Perfect. So now if this task object, this one, if it exists, right? So if it's not null, then it means the task exists, which means we are in a edit mode. And if it doesn't exist, which means, for example, if it's null, then we are in add mode. Basically we are adding a new task. I hope that makes sense. And then whatever changes we make to this task, okay, for example, if we are adding or we are editing, right, the changes, then we need to output those changes to our parent component. So for that we will be using output property like this. So we'll implement it. Okay, and we also need to import our event emitter. So with event emitter, we can output any property we want using .emit. Okay, now we need to create our form model, because we will be either editing or adding the task. So for that we need to have some properties so that we can change it, right? So we'll have a task data property like this, and this will be basically a type of object, and it will have different properties such as title, description, status, and whoever we assign this task to. Okay, so like this, we will have a title property of type string, description of type string, status to do in progress done, okay, as usual, and assignee ID would be string or null. Now we need to initialize this form object. Okay, so here we will basically say title would be empty in the beginning. Similarly, we will describe our description, that would be also empty in the beginning. So like this. this would be colon. Okay, and we will have our status. So in the beginning our status should be to do, because someone just got assigned the task, right? And then we will have our assignee id, which would be null. So we're just initializing this object, which is our task data. Perfect. Now we need to have a variable so that we know if the user is in edit mode or if he's in add mode. Okay, so for that we'll have this is edit mode boolean here, and we will make it as false. Perfect. And then at the end, whenever user clicks on the assignee and he gets all the list of users, we need to store that inside observable. So I will have a users observable like this, which will be of type observable of user, and they will be array of users. Okay, so like this. And we need to get our data from store so that we can fill it inside this observable. So we need to inject our store as well. Okay, like this. We need to import this inject, and now we can use this store to get the data, basically all of our users. So here I'll say this dot store dot select. So use our selector, and if you remember for getting all the users, if we go in our user selector, we get it using this select all users. So we'll just be using this. So when we call select all users, you can see we can import it like this. Perfect. So after this, now we need to implement our ng-on-init method. Okay, so for that we need to implement it here. Okay, so here we'll say implements, and we'll call it on-init here like this. Now we can implement it here. So we'll say ng-on-init. So this is the method which gets called every time our this component is called. Okay, is created. So here we will have the logic. So first thing which we need to do is right at the time when this component is created, basically when ng-on-init is called, we will load our users at this point. Okay, here. So here I will call my store. So I'll say this dot store dot dispatch, and inside this I'll say user actions, this one dot load users. So I'll dispatch this action. Okay, and this will talk to my effect and then service and store all the users in our selector, and basically we can get it here like this. Perfect. Now after this, what we need to do is we need to see if we are in edit mode or if we are in add mode. So for that, if you remember, I said if we have this task property available, it means we are in edit. So we'll check if this dot task is available like this, then our this dot is edit mode equals to true. Then we can show UI according to that. Okay, like this, and we can say this dot task data basically, and then we can fill the basically this task data, this one, all the properties using our this task because it's already filled up. So here we will go and we will fill up all these properties. So it has a title, and we will get this title from this task. Okay, so this would be task dot title. So similarly we will fill all the other properties as well. Okay, so like this, we've got our description, this dot task dot description, status. Okay, and then we've got assignee id as well. Perfect. So we have handled the case where if user clicks on edit task, his task will be predefined with all the data. Okay, now we need to handle our on submit. So whenever user, for example, clicks on edit or even on add, then we need to show him the full form, right, with all these details, and depending on what he clicks, add or edit, we need to dispatch that specific action. So here we'll define our on submit method. Okay, and inside this now we will write our logic. So first thing we need to do is we need to create our payload. So payload which we need to send either if it's add or if it's edit, right? In the action we need to send a payload. So here what we need to do, we need to create that payload. So we'll say constant payload, and now we will create this data. So like this, I'll just copy this for now. So now when we want to submit our data, we will get the data from our this form model. So we'll take this task data object and we'll fill all the properties using this one. So here it will be task data, and here as well like this, as you can see. Perfect. So all of the data we are getting is like this dot task data dot title dot description dot status assignee id like this. So basically from here task data dot title description status assignee id. Okay, and also before proceeding, I saw that we made our is edit mode as true here when the task exists, right? But when if it doesn't exist, then we should have a else case, and we need to make our is edit mode as false. Perfect. So now we can continue with it. So here at this point we need to have our if condition to see if the user is in edit mode or no, because we are submitting our form, right? So we'll say if this dot is edit mode is true and our task exists. So basically, and this dot task like this. If both of these are true, then what we need to do, we need to dispatch our update action. So if you remember in the task component, this one, the task store, here in the actions you can see we have got for add and we have got for update. So we are updating and we are not adding. Okay, so this time we will dispatch the update action. So here I'll say this dot store dot dispatch and we'll dispatch our update action. So we'll say task actions dot update. So update task, this one. And if you remember, this takes a props, basically payload of task. Okay, so here we need to pass our updated task property. So we'll pass the object here and the property we need to pass is our task. Okay, and this time if you remember, inside this we need to pass the object. Inside that id property was essential, so we need to pass this dot task dot id, this one, and the rest of the payload. So like this. Perfect. So now as you can see we have got an error and here it says is not assignable to this. So what we need to do is we need to go here in the assignee id and we need to remove this null basically, and we need to say, I'll show you what. So here we'll say if this is equals to null, then we need to give it undefined like this. Okay, if that is not the case, then we need to pass our task id. So we'll say this dot task data dot assignee id like this. So you can see the error is gone. So we just converted our payload so that it matches our model. Okay, now after this bit, now we know that our edit mode is done. Okay, then else we'll have basically if this is false, right, which means user is trying to add a new task. So for new task we need to get the current user id so that we can set them as reporter. Okay, so here we'll say this dot store dot select, and from here we'll say select current user id, this one. If you remember, this one we are getting from our user selector. Okay, so current user id we get from here, then we pipe, and inside this we filter our uid. So like this filter, and we get uid, and we use arrow bracket with this like this. Perfect. So we get our uid here at this point. Then we take the first, so we use first, it's a RxJS operator. Okay, and after this we can subscribe to the data, basically this one. So here I'll subscribe it, and what I'll get, basically this uid, right? So here I'll get the uid and I'll call it reporter id like this, and here I'll open the arrow bracket, and inside this now we can actually pass our add task action with this uid we have now. Okay, basically this reporter id. So here we'll say this dot store dot dispatch, and now we need to pass our task actions dot add task like this, and inside this, if you remember, now we have our task data. Okay, so now here in this task data object, first we will get the payload. Okay, so basically all of this data, and then we need to pass this reporter id. So here we'll have the reporter id, and this would be our reporter id which we are getting from this one. Okay, here like this. And then regardless of what user has done, either if he has edit or if he has add a new task, we need to close our this model. So here I will say this dot on close. So I'll create this method basically where we close this model. Okay, like this. Now we need to create this on close method here. So after this I'll create on close, and you can see what I'm doing is, so I'm calling my this dot close, so the event emitter I created, which is this one. Okay, and I'm using its emit event to pass it. So I'm saying this dot close dot emit, and then we'll close our this model. Okay, that's it. Perfect. So now we are done with our component code, but I'll just explain you this bit properly if you're confused. So here, if you remember, in our task.add task, we were emitting our ID. So this is our task ID, because we haven't created the task yet, so we don't have it. That is why we are omitting it. But this reporter ID is basically the user who's creating the task. So we are just storing that information in our payload. If you go to our task payload, basically this task model, here you can see we have this reporter ID, right? This one. And assignee ID, we haven't assigned the task to anyone yet. That is why this is optional. I hope all of this makes sense to you. Now we need to go and create our template code. So we'll create our model UI now. Okay, so I've already got the template code as you can see here, but in order to implement it, first we need to go in our component and we need to import our common module and our forms module. Okay, so here inside this we'll have the common module and we will have our forms module like this. Perfect. Now if you go to the HTML, you can see the errors are gone, and now I will go through all of this code and explain you. Okay, so we'll minimize this one. Okay, so as you can see here on the screen, we have got our component, how it looks like. So you can see we've got the header, we've got the h2 to say if it's in edit mode or we want to create a new task. So you remember we created this property. Based on that, we have got the on close button basically, which emits the on close event. Okay, after this we've got this whole form. Okay, where we have got this button to submit our form. Okay, so depending on if our is edit mode, if it's true, we say that save changes, otherwise we say create task. This is all like pretty much same stuff. And we've also got a button to cancel, like if we do not want to continue. But to then submit the form, we have got this ng submit property which comes with our form. On that we call our on submit. This on submit is the method, basically this one, which basically submits our form, makes a request to our backend using our actions here. Okay, like this. And we've got this task form which we have linked to ng form here like this. We are also using it here, as you can see, task form.form.valid to show our button, to submit the form or not. So inside this obviously we have got all of these form fields. So one is for our name, then we collecting our description. Similarly we are getting our users. Okay, so this bit, and then similarly we have got our this one basically to assign if it's a to do task, in progress or done. Now the important bit here is you can see we have used our ng model to connect our form. So you can see we got this task data model here, this one. So we've connected all of this property using our ng model. Okay, so we have used two-way data binding to bind them. So whenever our data is filled, because of the two-way data binding, our data will be filled up with this data. Okay, the HTML. Now the important bit from this is our this div. So this is where basically we assign users to the specific task. So when the user clicks on drop down, you can see we have got this select here. Okay, and we use our ng model task data dot assign id property, and inside we have option. So by default we provide this option which is unassigned. Okay, and then this is the most important bit here. In these options we basically loop through all the users we have. So for that, you remember inside this we have got this user selector, this one. So we use this selector to get the data in this observable. Now instead of getting the data from this observable here, we use our async pipe. So here you can see we use async pipe. All we get each user, and then we show our user.name for each of the option. Here you can see. So that is how easy it is to get all list of users and show them in a drop down. And that is it. That is all of our full form. So this is the most important bit of our application, and I know it is a lot to take, but it's pretty basic stuff. So I'll also have all of this code in our GitHub as well. So the GitHub link I'll provide in this video's description. You can get all the code from there as well. Okay, if not, you can see from screen how I've got. So I'll just minimize it like this, and you can see this is the whole code. Okay, it's pretty straightforward. Now we can go and do some styling for our this model. So here I've already got some styling, as you can see. So you can also copy this styling from the GitHub. Okay, there we go. We have it, a complete reusable and professional looking model component. Now we need to update our Kanban board so that we can open this model. Okay, so the model we created, which is this, now we should be able to open this, right, and close this. So, and we also need to wire up the delete functionality, right? So we'll be able to delete a task, and the drag and drop logic as well, so that we can drag and drop tasks from here to here to here, right? So we need to do all of this. So first let's go to the task card component, this one, and we will update this component. So for example, whenever we have a task card here, right, and whenever user clicks on it or delete on it, we need to emit all those events. Okay, so going into here, we already have our input, right, this one. Now what we need to do is we need to have a edit. Whenever user is clicking on the card, right, he wants to edit, right, and also the delete functionality. So we need to implement both of those. So how do we do that? So just here after the input, we'll have these two properties. Okay, and we'll import at the red output here like this, and same for event emitter, we will import it as well. Perfect, there we go. So now we are outputting, basically emitting two values, edit and delete. So whenever user clicks on this, then we emit this edit event, and whenever user clicks on the delete button we'll have on the specific card, then we'll emit the delete output. Okay. Now let's go to our task card component HTML. So now we need to put these two properties as well right here so that user can click it. So let's implement those. So here after the p tag we'll have a div and we'll call this footer. So we'll give it a class and we'll call it card footer like this. And here we'll have a span, and this one basically will be our task.id. So we'll show the ID of our each task. Okay, this can be optional. If you don't want, we can remove this as well. And then we will have our button like this, and this will be our delete button. So we can call this button like here X. Okay, so basically whenever you want to delete, and then here we will have our event emitter. So here we'll have a click event, and here we'll pass our event dot stop propagation first, because we want to do something else whenever this button is clicked. And what we want to do is we want to take our delete logic we have, which is delete, and we want to emit. So we'll say delete dot emit like this. There we go. So whenever this button is clicked, our delete dot emit event will be passed out, okay, from this component. So now I'll just give some basic styling as well to these bits. So here, and also you can see whenever user clicks on this div, I have put another click event where you see I've got click edit.emit, because whenever user clicks on this card component which we'll have here, at that time we want to edit. That is why I am passing this edit.emit. And whenever user clicks on specific that button, that time I want to pass delete.emit. Okay, I hope all of this makes sense. Perfect. Now we'll go to the main event. So let's update our Kanban Board component so that we can control this modal, handle, and drag and drop logic. Okay, so inside the TS file, this one, first thing we need to do is we need to load our add edit task module. So this one, add edit task component. So we'll be using this inside HTML, right? So I have loaded it here. Now after this, we will have some properties which we need. For example, first is if our model is open or not. So I'll have is model open, this one, and we'll initialize it as false. Then I'll have another which is editing task. So is user editing the task right now or not? So for that we'll have a task, and we'll also give it type null and initialize it with null in the beginning. Okay, that's it. When he's editing, that time we'll give this task. Now we have ng on init where basically we dispatch our load task. Okay, so now we can create the features you can think of, right? So whenever basically if you think whenever user clicks on this Kanban board component, right, what we need to do, we need to have like a open model, like whenever we want to open this basically add edit task module, right, this one, this component. So we'll have a open model function. Then whenever user wants to close, so we'll have a close model function, right, like this. And then whenever user wants to delete a task, we'll have a delete task method here. Okay, and for our drag and drop, so we'll call that method on drop. We need to implement that. So that's all the feature basically we will be implementing. So let's start with our open model. So whenever user wants to open this model, basically our add edit task, right? So we'll declare the method, we'll call it open model. And what this will take, it will take our task, right? So here we'll have task which will be of type task or null. So or here and null like this. And we can just initialize it as null here as well like this. There we go. Now inside this, whenever user has clicked this, basically user has opened our this component, right? And he wants to either add or edit, whatever. So then we'll take our this dot is editing task, right? This is basically our local state of the task. So basically we are storing the task inside this variable. Okay. So here we will give our task value to it. So this one we are getting from this model. Okay. So we are passing it here. And we are saying that is model open is true at this point, because user is obviously opened it using this method, so we're making it true. So similarly we'll have our close model as well, and in that one what we'll do, we'll make our is editing task as null again and is model open as false, because we have closed the model. So here we'll have our close model. Okay, so we have implemented both of these. Now comes our delete task. So we'll call it on delete task. Okay, so basically we want to delete our task. So you remember how do we delete a task? If you remember our action, we have a task ID. So we have this task ID of type string, and we just need to dispatch our action, and that's it. So here we just directly pass our action. So we'll say this dot store dot dispatch, and inside this we pass our action. So we need to import our task actions, this one, and we'll say delete task. Easy as that, like this. And only thing you can see we need to pass is our task ID. So here we need to pass the task ID in object there. Okay, but instead of directly allowing user to delete it, what we will do is we will use our JavaScript confirm dialog box and we will put this inside that. So asking user yes or no, basically if you really want to delete it, then press yes, then only this will execute, otherwise no. So basically we'll just put this inside this. So you see, basically it asks if confirm dialog box, are you sure you want to delete this task? If user clicks yes, then only this condition get executed, otherwise it won't. Perfect. So our basic operations are done. Now comes our most important functionality of this application, which is our drag and drop. So basically which allows us to drag and drop our task from one column to another. So now let's implement our on drop functionality. Okay, so on drop, basically this is drag and drop. So we have an event and that would be of type our CDK drop. So this one CDK drag and drop, and it will basically take our task array like this. We'll open this method here, and now let's write the logic. So now we'll have a basic condition. For example, if user doesn't do any change, like he takes a task, okay, he drags it and drops it here in the same column, then we do not want to do anything and want to just return our method at that point. So we'll implement that one here. So here we'll have this condition. We'll say if event.previous_container equals to event.container, at that point he has done no changes, so return. But if it is not the case, then we need to start implementing. So we'll say constant task, and we'll say it should be event.previous_container dot data. So we'll get the data, and inside that we will pass our event. So we'll say event.previous_index, this one, okay, like this. So what we are doing here is we are taking our task, okay, so we are getting it from here, whatever it was the previous value, and now we are taking our new status, so where he wants to basically drop, so like this. So this one we need to get which column he wants to exactly put it now. So this one will be basically this dot, and we'll create a method which will get us the column he wants to move on. So we'll create a method, we'll call it get column status, like this. Okay, this one, get column status, and what it will do is it will take our ID. So we'll say event.container.id. okay, now we can find basically our column ID specifically from it. So here we'll say if, we'll say new status, basically if we are getting some new status from here, basically if he has changed, then only we want to go and dispatch our action to update the task. Okay, basically we are shifting it, right? We are shifting it from our to do to in progress or done, so we need to update that specific property. So that is why we are passing our update task here. So this one will say this dot store dot dispatch, and inside this we'll pass our task actions dot our update task, right? We are updating our task. So here inside we'll pass the property and we'll pass our task. So this will again be object like this. We obviously need to pass our ID, so here we'll have our task.id, and then we have our status. So that is what we are changing, right? Status would be our new status. So here if you see, if we go to our task actions, you can see that this is the one what we are trying to do, update our task, right? So we take the task and we pass this property, and we always pass our ID, as you can see this one, right? So here you can see this is the property we are changing, which is our status. So one of them will be changing, either to do, in progress, or done. We are selecting one of them. So that is why we are passing this status here. So there you can see this one, and we'll be getting the status using this method, which is our get column status. So let's declare this method. So this one here, and now let's implement it. So here I already got the method. So you can see I've got this get column status. So we'll just put here. So basically it takes our container ID of type string, which we pass from here, okay? And we say basically it should return a type of either to do, in progress, or done, or null, okay? So we say if container ID dot includes our to do, basically if it includes this string, okay, then we need to return our to do, otherwise in progress, or we need to return our done, otherwise we return null. So basically this method, it returns us either one of our status, which we have to do, in progress, done. Then basically this new status, it holds this, okay? And then inside this if condition, if our new status exists, basically when we get something from here, right? If it's not null, it means user has changed, right? Then only we pass this action to update our task, and then we update its status from to do to in progress or done, whatever it is, okay? So now let's go to our Kanban board component and update the template. So we will implement all of this logic together. First, we will add a create task button. So we can basically create a task, right? Right now what we are doing is just loading, as you can see here. So in the beginning, we will create our create task button here. So here we'll have our div, and inside the div we will have a button, and we'll call this button our create task. So we'll have a plus here, and we'll call it create our task. So like this, okay? And this button will have a class. We'll give it btn primary, okay? And we need to give it a click listener. So here we'll have our click event, and we'll call our open model, right? The open model we created, which is this one, okay? So that is it for our button. Now we just give a class to here, and we'll call it our board header, okay? That is it, like this. Perfect. Okay, so in each of this app task card component, we need to pass our edit and our delete events, okay? So we need to bind those events, which is our edit and our delete event. So if you remember here in the task card component, we have this edit and our delete, right? So we need to receive it here in our component. So here inside this component, we will go and receive it for each of the task card, okay? So here after this, we will have our edit, so this functionality, and whenever this basically event is triggered, the event is emitted from that component, we need to call our onEdit method. So here we need to open our model, so like this, and inside this we will pass our task. Similarly, we will do for delete as well. So after this, we'll have our delete, and for delete we will pass our onDelete task method, this one. Inside this we pass our task id, so task.id, there we go. So similarly, we will do the same stuff for all of our tasks. Basically currently we did for our to do, similarly we'll do for in progress and our done section. So here after this, I'll pass this one as well, and same for this one as well, there we go. Perfect. So now whenever user clicks on our open model, basically, right, at that time what do we need to do? We need to show our this model, right, which is this add edit task component. So we need to load that component here. Here in the component you can see this is the name of our component. So I'll copy it, and now here we will load it like this. So you can see our component is now loaded, okay? Now we want to show it on some specific condition. So we only want to show it when user, for example, clicks this, basically when our model is open, okay? So here you can see in our component we have this open model, right? This is the place where we make our is model open boolean as true. So we'll use this boolean in order to show this component or in order to hide it. So here inside we will use the ngIf condition, and we'll say if is model open, if it is true, then only we need to show this, otherwise we do not, okay? And now if you remember this app edit task component, this one, it receives the input property of task, right, in order to show all the data, right? I hope you remember all of this. So in order to do that, we need to pass this task property, right, so that it can receive and display in HTML. So for that, we will go here and pass this task data. So here we'll have this property task, and we will pass our editing task property. So if you remember, we created this editing task, right, where we pass this whole task. So we need to pass this task inside this. So here we will pass basically this is editing task, okay, this one. Whenever we open the model, we pass this task to this. So we'll copy this and we will pass this inside this. So we'll say this dot is editing task, we'll passing it here. Perfect. Okay, now comes the last bit. So whenever we open a model, we should also be able to close it, right? So if you see here in the component, which is our this model component, we output a close property. So this property is basically presented here in our HTML, right? This one, when user clicks on this close, at that time we pass this emit event, okay, the output property. So we need to go in our Kanban board component here inside the HTML, and we need to pass this property as well. So here what we are doing this time we are not sending the property, we are receiving the data from there. So for that we will use our close property, you can see like this in the round brackets, and at that time whenever we receive, what do we want to do? We want to call this method, our close model. So it will make our is model open as false and make our that local variable to store the task as null, like this. So here we will call our close model. Perfect. With that, all of the pieces are now finally connected. So we need to implement one last thing. So if you remember, we had this onDrop method, right, allowing our users to drag and drop each task they want. So we need to go here and we need to implement that. So inside this, after this, we are going to be putting our CDK drop list dropped. So this one basically, it will call our on drop and do the logic which we have already written. So we need to do this for each of our div basically, which has our task card component. So we'll be doing it here as well, and for our to-do list column as well. So here after this, we'll put this, and that is it. And with that, all of our pieces are now connected. So our Kanban board is now fully interactive. So we can open here, we can go to our local host, and we can open our model here by creating on the new task. So when we create new task, you can see, there we go. Our beautiful add edit task component is there. So this is our model where we can add a new title. I can say first task. So we can say here first task here. Then we can add some detail about it, whatever we want. Okay, like this. And we can assign it to the user. So currently, if you know, we have only one user Geo here. So we can go there and we can assign this task to the Geo user. Once we do that, there we have our task ready. So now we can even click this and we can edit this. You can see all the details are filled up. So most of our application is now done. Now the important feature I'll show you, which is if we go here in our cloud and if we refresh this, we should have a task collection there. We have the task collection in our Firestore, and all of the details like assignee ID, description, reporter ID, status, title is there. So our database is working correctly and it is connected to our front end. So now if you see here, okay, going back here, you can see we have got the status as to do as well. So now if I go here, and you will see that I can drag and drop as well. So I just drag and drop it to in progress and it worked so smoothly. So we can drag the cards between different columns, okay, and we can update their status. So now you can see when we click here, the update is already status to done. If we go here, we can see the status has already also changed here. So whatever changes we are doing, it updates real time. So as soon as I put it in progress and we go here, you can see this just changed right now. And we can also test our edit functionality as well. So when we click here on the task, you can see the description changes. So I can change it to, for example, changing it now. Okay, and I'll also change the status to do, and I'll change it to second task like this. Once I do the save changes, you can see all the changes have been reflected in our front end, right? And if we go to our back end, you can see all the changes have been reflected here as well. So now if we go here and do our last operation, which is our delete, so you can see we have got the cross sign here. So when we click here, it asks, are you sure you want to delete the task? Once we click OK, you see it's gone from here. And even from our backend, you see the task doesn't exist anymore. So it's gone. If we refresh it, you can see the collection is gone too. So that is it. With that, all of the pieces are now connected. So this is a really important step which we have done. Now if we see our task again, so I'll just create any random task, okay, like this, and I'll assign to this user. So if you see our task currently, it just looks so basic, right? The cross sign is here and a lot of other stuff. So we need to give it a professional touch. Also, we cannot even see who this task is assigned to. Like, you know, in Jira, you can see who this task is assigned to, like the name of the user. So we need to make our task card more informative, okay? So by displaying the name of the assignee, and also if you want, you can show avatar as well. But I will just assign the name of the user right now, who this task is assigned to. So to do this, we will use one of the most powerful features of ngrx. So for that, we will be creating a new view model, okay? So basically an interface. We will create it by mixing two selectors, one which creates our task, another which gives us the user. So we need to take this task, right? And we need to take the user, which is this one. We need to combine both of these selectors, and then we need to get one specific selector where we can get that and show it here, okay? So our goal is to combine our task data with our user data. So we've got the task data and we have got the users data. So we have to combine both of them, and then we need to get one final answer and use it in our component. So basically this will keep our component clean, and all the complex logic of this will be handled where it should be, which is our selectors. So let's go into our task model file, which is this one, and we'll create a new interface. So this interface will represent the combined data structure. So one thing to remember is whenever you have these kind of needs where you have to get some additional data from one of the model, right? And then you have to use it into another model, then it's always better to create a specific model for whatever you need, okay? So let's add that. So we'll call our interface, we'll say export interface, and we'll call it task with assignee, because this task now will have the assignee name as well, which is coming from our users. So we'll call it task with assignee, like this. Okay, and what it does, it extends our this task, because we need all of this property, right? So we're creating an interface mixing both of those, like this. There we go. So we're creating this interface and we are taking the properties of this task. Okay, so right now this interface has all of this property, and we're adding one additional one which we'll call assignee name. So like this, assignee name, and we will keep it optional for now, and this would be of type string. So that's it. Now this model is basically this plus this. I hope it makes sense. Now comes the important part, which is joining our selectors. So this is where the magic happens. So inside our task selector, this one, we will create a new selector. Okay, so what this selector will do is it will take all of our tasks. Okay, so it will return us all the list of our tasks, and it will return us the users. Okay, we already have them. Then it will join both of them. Okay, and after that it will match the assignee ID from our task. So if you remember, in our task model we have this assignee ID, right? So it will match this to the UID of the user. So if you remember the user model, it have this UID, so they are same. So it will mix both of them, and they will find the name, which is this name. Okay, and then it will give us this task with assignee name, and we can use this wherever we want. We will basically use it to here to display our name of the assignee. Okay, perfect. So let's define this selector. So inside our task selector, let's create this selector. So we will call this selector select task with assignee info. Okay, and then we will use our create selector function here, like this, and inside this we need to take both of the data. So one is our select all tasks. So you can see we have got all the tasks here. So I'll use this already derived selector, and then I need another selector which is my users. So for that I need to import my users. So here when I write select all users, you see this one, we are importing it now from our users. So we have both the data, both the available data, all the tasks and all the users. Now we need to mix them. So for that what we do is we take our tasks here like this, and we take our users. Okay, we're getting both of the data like this. Perfect. And then here we will say what it should be. So it should be of type this new model we created, right? So if you go here, this task model, this one, it should be of type this, right? Task with assignee. So in the selector we'll say this should be of type this, and here we can open our arrow bracket, and inside this what we need to do, we need to import this. So there we go. Now inside this, first we will make a users map. So I'll show you why we do that. So we have this users map, and we'll store all the properties here. So we'll say new map, okay, like this, and then we will say users data we have, which is this one, right? So we want to go over it. So we'll say users.map, and inside that we'll go over each user like this, and we'll say take the user.uid. So this is the one, and take the user.name. These are the things we care about right now, UID and name. Okay, so that's it. Now what we need to do is we need to return our task. So we need to go over all the tasks, and we need to take this name property and put it there. So you see how we do it. So we'll say return task.map, so we can go over all the properties. Inside that I'll go over each task, like this, open my arrow bracket as usual. Inside this what I do, first I want to take all the task property, because I don't want to change the existing property, right? So what this will do is it will copy all the original task property here. So basically all of our name, task name, ID, etc. So if I go here, you can see this one, assignee name. So this is the one I need. There we go. So we've got assignee name here, and what we'll do, we'll say if task.assignee ID, if this exists, right? So we will give it from the user map we created. Why we created this user map? Because from user map we can easily look up the data. So user map dot get, so like this, and inside this we want to find it on the basis of the assignee ID, right? So we'll say user map dot get task dot assignee ID, like this. So what it will do is, with this task dot assignee ID, it has created a key value pair, and it will find us that specific username here. It will return it there. Okay, but if it is not the case, then we will say undefined. That's it. But hopefully every time we have assignee ID, then we should be able to get the name from here. Okay, there we go. Now after this we just close it, and this selector, we are done. Perfect. So now we are done with our selector. So now if you see this selector, what does it have compared to our this basic selector of select all tasks? So if you see this selector, it has the extra username. So who is assigned to this specific task? So what should we do? We should go and replace this selector with this one, okay? Because it has the extra info. So I'll replace it everywhere like this. And I'll just put this selector on top. There we go. Okay, so as you can see, all the errors are gone, and now our select to do task actually has the extra info, which is, if you see here, task dot, you can see we have got our assignee name too. That's what I'm saying. So now we can use this into our task component and display extra info. Perfect. So now as we have changed our selectors, let's also change their names. So this would be now select to do task with assignee name. This would be select in progress task with assignee name, and this would be select done task with assignee name. Okay. So I'll go here and change all of this. So there we go. Now we have our updated selectors, as you can see. Okay, now let's go in our Kanban board component and update these selectors. Okay, so I'll go into this one, and here you can see all of these are giving error because we need to change their names. So I'll remove this one here, and this one would be now select to do task with assignee name. This one would be in progress with assignee name, and then this one would be done. Select done task with assignee name. There we go. So now we have successfully changed our selectors. So if you remember, this selector basically takes now task with assignee name, that variable, right? Not this one. So if you go here, you can see this one. This is the one we are taking because it has this. So we need to take this model. So we need to replace this model with this one. Perfect. And we need to obviously import it, right? There we go. Perfect. So this is done. Then also here, if you see in our on drop, we take this task array. So here also we need to change, because when we drop now, we'll have basically this task with assignee name as well. Okay. So I think that is all for here. Now we need to go into our card component, task card component, and we need to update it there as well. So inside this, now this would be task with assignee name. Okay. So we need to import it like this. And why we are updating it with this task with assignee? Because now this task has an extra property which we need is our assignee name. So inside the HTML, we can go and now we can load our task dot assignee name. So here you can see like this. Okay. So we'll just replace it here. So you can see we have got exactly all the details are same. So title, description, and here we just show our assignee name like this. Okay. And we show our task ID and other stuff. We can remove this bit if you do not need it. Okay. So now we'll go in the SCSS file and give some styling here for the later part. There we go. So now if we save it and if we go to our component here, and if we create a new task, and let's see the changes in action. So I'll create a new task and I'll say, for example, Monday task, and I'll write some details, assign it to the user. Okay. And if we create the task, okay, so the task didn't came. So it means while implementing, we did some changes. So let's do some debugging. So inside the Firebase, you can see the task exists. It means the problem is in our front end loading. So what changes we did? We did changes in our selector. So in our Kanban board component here, let's go and see what did we do. Okay, so this one, okay, so this one should be select to do task with assignee name, and we have written it wrong here. Okay, so this one would be select to do task with assignee name. Okay, so now if I save it, hopefully I should see the task. Okay, perfect. So I see the task here. Even if you refresh or whatever, you should see. So you got the ID here, and then you got task title, description, and this avatar here with the username. Okay, but our username is missing, so we need to do something for that. Okay, so here we need to dispatch one more action. We need to load our users as well as soon as this ng on init is load. So here we'll say this dot store dot dispatch, and here we'll say user actions. Okay, this one dot load users. So we load our users and we load our task so that they are in sync. Okay, this is a common ngrx problem. Now if we save it, you can see that I have got the username here. Perfect, and it looks really beautiful. So everything is working properly. We have got our delete button here. We've got the name and the ID. I do not think personally that we need ID here, so I'll be deleting it from the task card component here. It doesn't look good, so we'll just get rid of it. Okay, and if you save it now, then yeah, we can see here our delete and our name here. And just like that, our cards are way more useful now. So by creating a simple selector like this, basically, which joins our data, we kept our components really clean. So in our Kanban board component, you can see the component is super clean. And we have to do super minimal changes because most of our work is done in our ngrx state layer, okay? So where it should actually go. So this is a pattern which you should try to use in all of your applications, okay? And just like that, we have a fully functional interactive Kanban board. We can add, edit, and even delete our task. We can also drag and drop them from one column to another and see who the task is assigned to. In the next part, we will implement advanced UI controls like filtering. So as you know, we will have my task and all of the task options. So user can see only his task if he wants. And we'll also have a logout button as well. So user can log out of this app. Perfect. So let's move on to that. Welcome back. In this part, first we will implement a filter that will allow user to toggle between their task and generic task. So basically we'll have two buttons, one mentioning all tasks and other would be my task. So this is the best place to use our ngrx selectors again. And secondly, we'll finally wire up the logout button in the header component. So now with that, our authentication cycle would be complete. Okay. So let's go to our VS Code and let's start implementing the selector through which we'll get different data. One for our specific user and other for all the users. Okay. So here at the end, let's go and create our new selector. So we'll call this selector specifically select my task because we only want the current user logged in his task here, right? So here we'll say export constant select my task, and whatever code I'm writing, this would work for all the users. So our application can have 5, 10, 15, 20, whatever amount of users, and they will all be able to see their own personal task, or if they want, they can see the generic task, and which I will show you later on when I'll create multiple users and show you how it works. But now let's create our selector. So here we need two things. First, we need task with assignee info, right? Which is basically our this one. So all the tasks we need first, okay? And after that, we need another selector basically, which only has our current user info. Now, if you remember, we have this selector, which is called select current user ID, this one. If we go to this selector, this is in our auth selector, this one. So we get the specific user who's logged in, the current user ID, right? So now we can go in this task and find the user with this ID and filter those tasks. Easy, right? So let's do that. So we are gonna combine these selectors. So here we'll take all the tasks and we'll take the current user ID. So like this. Perfect. And now here we'll open our arrow bracket, make the object, and first we'll say if current ID doesn't exist, then at that time we just want to return empty array because it doesn't exist, right? Otherwise, so this is just a basic validation, you don't need to really write it. So here after that we'll have our task. So we'll return the task for this specific user, which is this one, right? So we're going to store them inside this selector. So we'll say return task.filter, and here we'll take our each task, open our arrow bracket, and now we'll write our condition. So we'll say if task dot assignee ID, right? If it is equals to our this current user ID, then this is the user whose task is assigned to. So we need to show only those tasks. Okay, but apart from that, if you also want to write one more condition, like if task dot reporter ID equals to this one current user ID, then you can show those as well. But I don't want to care about reporter ID. I just want to see if the assignee ID is assigned, then only show the task, otherwise don't. So I'll only keep that. So now with this selector, I'll be able to see all the tasks assigned to a specific user. Okay, perfect. So now all the complex logic is done here. We can just go in our component and use this selector to get the task. Okay, so let's go in the Kanban board component. So this is the main component, right, where everything loads. So here we'll implement this. So now if you think, we will have two types of observable for all of this. Okay, so one is, for example, to do task, other would be my to do task, then in progress task, other would be my in progress, done task, and second would be my done, because we have two observables for two type of data, right, my and all. So we will change all of this. Okay, here, so I'll just copy this here and I'll replace this. So this to do task, I have said this should be all to do task, all in progress, all done. This is same. Okay, and this one I've said my to do task, and what I've done here, this dot store dot select, and we have got here select my task, the one which we implemented. You can see here, right, this one task selectors. So select my task, right, this one, And this one we are also putting a condition here using map here. So I'll just update from RxJS, and you can see, so we are taking all the tasks we are getting from the selector, okay, using map. We're going to each task using filter, and we're seeing if the status, if it is equals to do, then only show us those tasks. If it's equals to in progress, then show us the in progress one, done one, show us that. Easy. So we haven't done anything complex here, just taking data from our selector, using map to go over all the data, and then filtering it on the basis of the status. That's it. Perfect. So now we have loaded both of the types. So first for generic and second for our specific task. So now we need to implement last thing, which is our filter state. Because when user select, for example, my task, right? Then we need to show my user specific task. If he selects all tasks, then we need to show all the generic tasks, all the tasks available. So for that, we will be storing it in a filter mode. So here I'll say filter mode, this should be all, and the other one would be my. So I am making it like this, and initially it would be equals to all, like this. So I've just created a type here, a filter type. You can see what I've done. So what it will do is it will just track what view currently the user wants to see, all view or my view, initializing it with all in the beginning. Okay, so all the things would be exactly same. Only thing we'll need to do is when user clicks on, like for example, all or my, we'll call a method. So we need to call that method here. So for example, it would be set filter here, like this. And this method, if you see, it will take this thing, which is our filter mode. Okay, so here we'll have the mode, and mode would be of type, as I mentioned, all, or it would be of type my, like this. Okay, so inside this we will set our this dot filter mode equals to this mode, whatever user selects from the HTML. Okay, so this set filter method will implement in our HTML. He'll get the data from HTML and we'll set it here, and this filter mode will take it. Okay, this one. So it would be either all, my, or whatever. Okay, perfect. So now let's go in our HTML and let's add these buttons, as I mentioned, right? All of these buttons. So all button, my button. So we need to implement all of this. So we can create two separate versions of our board. Okay, so we need two versions, one all task, other my task. So let's create those two versions. So right now you'll see all of these errors because we need to change the name of these observables. Okay, but first let's start with creating our buttons. So inside the board header here, I'll have a div. Okay, and inside this we'll have two buttons. So like this, one button for our all, other button for our my task, like this. So this one would be like all tasks, right? This, and this one we'll call it my task. Okay, and then we can give some styling, obviously, which I'll show later on. But first I'll show you the basic implementation, which is our click event. Whenever someone clicks on this all task, we'll call our set filter method. Okay, and inside this, as you can see, it has two mode, all and my. So I will call here all. So you'll take a string and you'll call all. Similarly, you will have another click event on this my task one. Okay, and here we'll call set filter, and this time we will call my. Perfect. So now whenever we click this button with this one specifically, okay, it will go here in our mode, okay, this filter mode, and select whatever mode we select because of this button we implemented. So there we go. So now let's go back to our HTML. Okay, so now let's give some styling to all these divs and buttons so that it looks better. So we can give some class, we can give BTN primary and all the other stuffs depending on what user have selected. Okay, so here I've just got some styling. You can also get this styling from the GitHub file, which I will put in the bio. So you can see all of these bits like this. All the code is same. Only thing I put is some the CSS classes, and I've got some classes button, and here I'm setting BTN primary if depending on what mode is selected. Okay, so that's it. Now we can go and implement the important logic, which is our tab view. So depending on what user has selected. So what we will do is, here we have this div, right, where we have our board container, you can see. So we need to remove this. So what we will do in this div, basically which starts from here, we will put it inside a div as well. And here I will give a filter mode. So I will put a div and I'll say show this div. Basically I'll put ngIf, and I'll say if filter mode, basically if it is equals to all, okay, then only you show basically this div. So I'll copy paste this whole div, okay, like this. I'll remove it from here and paste it here. So you see, now we will only show all of this div container basically, which are all the to do tasks, right? I'll fix all of these later on, but you can see what I've done. So inside this div, if filter mode is selected to all, then only we'll see all of this content. But if filter mode is selected to my, then only we'll show our other div. So we'll create that div now. So after this div here, I'll create another div and I'll put the same condition, which is this ng if, and this time it would be basically this one should be equals to my, like there. So if user has selected my, then only we'll show their specific task. So for that, what we'll do is we will copy all of this content. So this would be exactly same. So I'll copy this from here. Okay. So full copy. So full content will copy and we will paste it inside this. Okay, perfect. Now we'll format this document because it looks a bit messy for now. Okay, there we go. So you can see at this point, I'll just maximize it. Okay, so you can see what we have got here. So we have got these two divs. So one is for our filter mode, which is all, another is for our filter mode, which is my. And our add edit task component, this would be same for both of them. So I won't be doing any changes to it. Okay, now coming to the specific selectors, we need to start changing them. Okay, so let's open this one and let's start fixing it. So here you can see this one are basically, if we go in our TS, I'll just expand this again. There. So now if we go to our TS file here, you can see we have this selector, right, which is all to do tasks. So we just need to start just refactoring them. So this would be all to do task. Okay, this one, and similarly this would be all to do task as well, like this, and same thing would go for all of these tasks, as you can see. So this would be all in progress task. So I hope this all makes sense to you. So we'll just copy this and this would be all done task, like this. So just copy and paste. And now what we will have is in this one, which is my section, this would be all my task, right? So this one you can see my to do task, my in progress, and my done. So I'll just go here and change it to my to do task. This would be my in progress task. Okay, this one. So you can do all of this pretty easy, and then this would be my done task. Okay, there we go. So now if we save it, you can see all the errors in these files are gone, and we have got our two different state management now, one for our all task and one for our my specific task. So now let's finally go in our SCSS file and add some styling. Okay, so I've already got some pre-style written here, which I'll just paste. You can also get all of the styling from the GitHub, because in this tutorial my aim is to focus on ngrx and logic bit and not the styling. So yeah, so let's go in our TS again and everything is saved.
So if we go back to our component, you can
perfect. So our UI looks really beautiful. So we have created some really beautiful looking UI here, but you cannot see any differentiation because we only have one task and we only have one user, right? So we need to create more users and more tasks, and we'll do that in the upcoming part where we'll have a logout button. So we'll be able to create multiple users. Okay, and then I can show you the functionality where you can see the differentiation between both of these tabs. Okay, so let's implement our final UI task, which is to wire up the logout button. So if you remember, we already created the actions for logout. So here you can see we've got the logout action, and in effects as well, we have got our logout effect. So all of the logic is already done. So all we need to do is we need to add the button, which is the logout button, to the UI so that we can start this process. So we need to go in the app component file, which is this one, and now we will write our logout logic here. So in order to know if the user is logged in or not, if you remember, in our auth selector, we have this selector which is called is logged in, this one, which checks if the UID is present or not. So we already know if the user is logged in or not. So we will be using this specific selector. Okay, so going back here in our component, first thing we need to do is we need to inject our store. So here I'll say private store, and this would be coming from our inject store, like this. Okay, there we go. Now after this, we will have this is logged in property. So to know if the user is logged in or not, we'll have this observable, which is logged in, and this would be of type observable as usual, and this would be a boolean because we'll get a true false value, right? So we'll initialize it. So we'll get the data from our store dot select, and we'll be using our selector, which is select is logged in, this one. Perfect. So now we have a true or false value depending if the user is logged in or not. So now we need to define our logout method, which user will call, right? So we'll have on logout here, and this method, what it will do is it will dispatch our logout action, easy as that. So this dot store dot dispatch, and we'll just dispatch our logout action. So auth actions dot logout, this one. That's it. Now all the logic is being handled in our store and whatnot. So that's all we need to do in our component side. Now in HTML, we just need to write our UI. So going here, so you can already see we have defined our this logout thing here. So we're just gonna define our button. So button, and we'll call this button logout. Okay. Now we will have our on logout method, which will be called every time the button is clicked. So we'll use our click listener here, and we'll call it on logout here. And that is it. We do not need to pass anything. That's it. Just this button like this. Now we don't want to show our logout button when user is already logged out, right? So for that we'll use this ngIf condition, and here that is why we basically got this is logged in. Through this we'll get to know if the user is logged out or not. So we'll say here basically if this is logged in is true, it means user is logged in, right? Then only show this. Otherwise if this is false, then don't. So we're saying ngIf true, then only show this. Okay. Now this is the observable, so we need to use our async pipe. So here we're going to be using our async pipe like this. Okay, and we'll be putting this inside round brackets like this, and you can see the errors are gone. So like this we have got our logout button defined. Now we can give some styling, so we can give it a class and we can call it logout button, and there you go, we are actually done with our UI. Now we can go in our SCSS file and give styling to this logout button. So here I've got this logout button styling, which is giving it a background color and the hover effect, that's it. So if we save this now, and you can see that we are getting an error in our component. So app component.html. Okay, so we can see it's giving us this error. So basically it's saying us to import common module. Yes, we need to import that in order to use ngIf directive. So in our app component, we need to import our common module. So we'll just import it, and with this you can see all the errors are gone, and you can see the underline is gone here as well. Perfect. With that our setup is ready. Now let's go to our UI, and there you can see we have got a beautiful logout button. If we refresh it, we can still see all the things here. Beautiful create task button, all task, my task, and now if I click on logout, you will be able to see that we have been logged out and gone to the main screen. Perfect. Now we can go here and we can register ourselves as a new user. So let's do that. So I'll create a user called test, and the email would be test@gmail.com. Now I'll also show you how we can differentiate between all task and my task, because now we have multiple users. Okay, so this one I'll start defining this. Okay, as soon as we register, you can see that we can see all the tasks which are present. So right now this geo user task also we can see. So perfect. You see, now we can go here and create a task. So I'll create a new task here, and I'll say this task is for only test team. Okay, there, and we will assign it to test. So in our Firebase, you can see from the users, now we have 2 users. So both the users detail are there, and how perfectly we are loading it. As soon as we click here, we get it using our selectors. So now when we assign this to test and we create our task, you can see the task is created here. Okay, but if I specifically select my task now, you will see the other task is gone. The geo task, we don't see it anymore. So this is a really useful case when you have a lot of tasks and you specifically are struggling to find your task. Then you can select my task, otherwise you can select all tasks. Okay, so now what I'll do is I will register as a different user, and I will show you real-time changes as well. So here I'll go here and I'll register as a new user now. So this would be a manager user I'll create. There we go. So now when we log in, you can see I can see all the tasks currently, right? But when I specifically click on my task, I shouldn't see any task. So you see, because this user doesn't have any task assigned. But now if you see here for this user, which is our test user, right? This one. Right now he only sees his task, okay? But if I go here and if I create another task here, I'll say another test task. So I'm creating it from a different user, and here I'll assign it to this test. As soon as I create this task, you can see it gets updated in real time. Did you see? It was just exactly as soon as we created it got updated. And also if I go here and for example take this task and move it to in progress, you will also see those updates happening in real time as well. So I moved it here and you see it went there. So that's how powerful our Firestore is. It provides us with real-time updates, and using ngrx we can make everything so smooth. Perfect. So with that, our application's most important features are completed. But in this part, we are going to add the final and I think the most impressive feature, which is real-time commenting. So we are going to implement a system where multiple users can come and comment and see others comment as well on any of the tasks. So like you can see, this is our another user, right? This one, and then we have got another test user here. So all of them can view and see each other's tasks. They can comment real time. They will be able to write their own comments. So all of these users will be able to see everyone's comment without even refreshing. Like, for example, if this user goes here and puts a comment on this task, right? And the other user here, he doesn't have to even refresh to see the comments. In real time, he should be able to see this. And all of this we will be able to do is because of our Firebase. Okay. So Firebase provides us a feature called on snapshot. So which is a real-time listener. And this is really important for modern web app. Basically, we can just use this on snapshot real-time listener and implement these changes. So let's start by thinking what our data structure should look like. So what are we storing? We are storing comments, right? So we can store an array of comments, right, inside a task document, but it can become a bit inefficient. So what we'll be doing is we will be using a much scalable approach, which is to use a sub collection. So we will create our data model for our comment first. So for each task document in our task collection, we can go here and we can create a sub collection for each of the document, and we will call that sub collection comments. Okay. So let's go into our VS Code and let's do the full ngrx setup for these comments. Okay. So inside our store, this one, you can see we have auth, we have task, we had users. Now we'll create one more, which will be our comments. So this would be new folder. We'll call it comments like this. And inside this, we will have our usual files, what we had for all of this, actions, effect, modal, etc. Okay. So first let's create our data structure. So we'll create our comments dot model dot ts like this. Perfect. So let's start by defining our comment interface. So here we have this comment interface. It will have an ID, like a comment should have its ID, like unique ID. A task ID, so basically which task this comment is for. Author ID, okay, we have author email, content, and created at. There are a lot of details, but it depends what you specifically want, and you can keep those details, right? So for example, created at, I'll keep all these details in order to show in the comment when this was written, etc. So now I'll go and I'll extend this comment and I'll create a new interface. So here I'll say export interface, and this would be my comment with author name. Okay, so I want to get the name of the author, so we'll extend our this comment. Okay, so it extends comment, and here we'll have the author name. So author name like this would be optional as string. Perfect. Now what we need to do is we need to go here and define the shape of our state, right? So with the comment is a state, like all of the other state, like auth and etc. So here we'll say export interface, and this would be our comment state. So comments state, and inside this we'll have the same stuff. So we'll have first our comment like this, and comment would be basically comment array. So it would be array of comments. So you can see this model is exactly same. For example, you can go and see our tasks. So if you see the task model, you can see it's exactly same. We have our is loading, error, and task. So the state we define, it's always same. Like what do we want to take care of, and the other are just side stuff like is loading and error. So we'll go here in our model, and obviously this should be small b, so boolean like this. And with that, our comment model is ready. So we'll create a new file and we'll call it comments.actions.ts. Perfect. So let's start defining our actions. So here we'll have the comment action to load our comments, then load comment success and load comment failure. So to load the comments, we pass our task ID because we want to get all the comments related to that task, right? And when we get a success, we get the array of comments, and for failure we have error as usual. And to add a comment, we will pass our basically task ID, basically which task we want to add a comment to, and the content, so basically our comment, right? And then we have add comment failure, okay, where we get the error string. And for this we don't need a add comment success here, because we will be having a real-time listener which will handle our update. Okay, so now let's go and handle our state, so basically creating our reducer. So here I'll create a new file and we'll call it comments.reducer.ts. Perfect. So first thing we need to do is we need to initialize our comment state. So like this, we have got our comment state. We just need to import it from here. So we've got comments which are basically empty in the beginning, and then we've got is loading as false, and we have got our error as well. And this is giving error. Let me see what is it. So we have basically comment which will be of type empty object like this. So we'll just call them comments. So we just need to also rewrite it here in our model, because these are comments, right, and not just a specific comment. So just rewriting it here like this. Now we can go and define our comment reducer. So this whole logic is always same. We define our initial state and then we start defining our on functions. So one would be to handle our load comment, then load comment success, and then our load comment failure. So I've already got them here. As you can see, we just need to start importing the stuff. So we'll import it from here, and the comment actions we need, okay, and that's it, they are gone. So we'll go through it. So this is the action we'll call to load our comments. We take the state and we make our is loading as true, and we get the comments as empty because we're loading right now. And once we get the success in this one, we update our reducer with this comments we get from the backend, okay, which is this. And for our failure, we just make our is loading as false, and same we do here as well, because at this point we are not loading anything. We have got the data from our backend. And as I mentioned, for adding the comment, everything happens in real time, so we do not need any reducer or anything like that. Okay, now we can go and implement our selectors. So here I'll go and call a new file, and we will call it comments.selectors.ts, like this. Now for selector, what we do always is we get our full comment state. So like this, we get the full comment state, and we define our comment key, which is this, okay, and this is the comment state which will import, and we need to create our feature selector, which is this one. Perfect. So now we have got the full comment state here. So now what we need to do is we need to select all of our comments. So basically get all the comments, right? So now we can go here and we need multiple selectors. So one of them we'll have is select all the comments. So we need all of the comments there are. So we'll use export constant and we'll call it select all comments. So we use here select comment state, which is this one, okay, and now from here we can take our comment. So we use our state like this, and we say state.comments. So at this point we have all our comments using this selector, okay, but what do we need? We need comments based on each task, right, not on all the comments. So we'll use another selector and we'll derive it from this one, okay. So here we'll create a selector, we'll call it select comments with author details, like this, okay. Create selector. So this will have our author detail too. So here we'll take two things. First we'll take this selector, which is our select all comments, and we'll take another selector which is our all users. So we need to know all of the users which are there, right? So for that we have the selector and call select all users. This one comes from our user selector. Now we can take both of these here. So we'll take comments and we'll take our users, open our arrow bracket, and we'll create the object. So what kind of object we want to create here? This would be basically comment with author name. You remember this model we created, right? It basically has an additional property which is author name. So we'll have the basically array of this, and now inside this we will create a user map, how we created before as well. So this would be user map like this, and what it will do is we'll have new map and we'll go over all the users, okay. So we'll say users dot map and go over all the user, open the arrow bracket, and we'll store its UID and its name, okay. So we'll say user dot UID and we'll store user dot name. There we go. Now what we'll do is we'll go over all of our comments and we will map our author name to this comments, okay. So here we'll return and we'll say comments dot map. So we'll go over all of them and we'll say each comment, go over it, open the arrow bracket, and inside the object we'll say take the comment data how it is and add an additional property which is our author name. So this property now we will give data from our user map. So this user map with the UID will match and will give this username property. Okay, so here we'll say user map dot get, and we will use our comment dot author ID, this one. So when we pass this comment dot author ID, it will match this and it will give us this user dot name aligned to it. Okay, perfect. So now with this, our this selector is ready. Perfect. And now as usual, we need to go in our app config and we need to register this. Okay, so going into app config file here, and here in the reducer section we will have this comments, and this would be coming from our comment reducer like this. There we go. Now we have provided this comment in our provide store as well, so it's available throughout our store. Okay, so now moving forward, we are going to update our task service. So we'll go in the task service, which is this one, and we will create our methods such as our get comments. Okay, and also we need to set the comment. So basically add comment. Okay, so we need to create these methods. Okay, so for this we will be using our Firestore on snapshot function. Okay, so as I mentioned, this is the function basically which will make sure that there is a constant connection between our app and the database. So whenever there is any change to our database, doesn't matter which user does changes to the database, adds a comment, this on snapshot function, it will reflect it real time in our application on the front end. Okay, so first we will implement the get comment function. So here we'll call the method and we'll call it get comments like this, and inside this we will receive our task ID. So because whenever we want to get comments for a task, we need to have its ID, right? So task ID of type string, we need this in order to get the comments for a task. Okay, and what this method will return, basically it's observable of type comments, right? So here we'll have our comment array like this one. Okay, and it will be obviously array, so array of comments. Perfect. Now we need to have return the observable, basically observable stream will be getting from here. We need to return the data. Okay, so for that we need to get the data first. So we'll have a collection and we'll call it comments collection. So we need to access this collection, right, first. So we'll say comment collection and we'll call our collection method here. Inside this we will call our Firestore, so this dot Firestore, and we need to mention the part from where we will get these comments from. So we'll have backticks here. So we'll have the task here like this, and we'll have backslash and dollar. So we'll make it dynamic, and we need to go to the specific task ID. That's where we'll have the sub collection, which we'll call comments. There we go. So this is how we get the part to our comments sub collection. Okay, now these comments we are getting, we need to arrange them in a query order. So I'll arrange them in a ascending order, how they are created. Okay, so just after this here we'll have this constant queue, and we'll get our query from our Angular Firestore, and we'll order them by this. So we have ordered them using our created at and ascending orders. So that is the order in which we will see our comments. Perfect. Now we have access to our comment collection. We have also ordered them as well. Now we can go and we can subscribe to this. So here we will return our statement. So we'll say return, and what you want to return, we want to return observable. So we'll say new observable like this, and inside this we'll have our subscriber, so like this. Okay, whatever data we are getting, and we'll open our arrow bracket. So here our on snapshot, this it returns a unsubscribe function, so we need to create that first. So we'll say here constant unsubscribe like this. Okay, and this would be on snapshot like this. So you can see it's coming from this Firestore, this one. So we take this and we take our query. So this query we created constant, right, this one, and we take our query snapshot. So query snapshot, there we go, comes from Firestore, and we open our arrow bracket, and inside this now we create our comments. So here we write our comments, basically which are of type this comment array, this one. Okay, so like this, and initialize it with empty array in the beginning. Now what we need to do is we need to go over this query snapshot. Okay, so here we'll say query snapshot dot for each. So we'll go over all the doc. Okay, open our arrow bracket, and now we will push all these query snapshots to this comments. Perfect. So you can see the errors are gone. So what we are doing is we are pushing data from this query snapshot, okay, every time, and filling it inside this comments array. Okay, and then once it's done here, after this we will use our subscriber.next. So subscriber.next. Okay, and inside this we will pass our comments. So subscriber.next, and then we need to take these comments and pass it here inside this. There we go. So with this now our this setup is done. Only thing we need to do is handle our error case. So after this, when we are done with our query snapshot, we'll have our error as well. So we'll take the error here. If there is an error, then we subscribe it to as well. So we say subscriber dot error. So whatever we get, doesn't matter our comments or error, we put them inside the subscriber and we pass it here like this. Now at the end, after this, so you see at this point where basically our this subscribe is done, then we return. So here we return our this function, which is our unsubscribe, which basically fills up our comments. So here we'll say return arrow bracket and we say unsubscribe. That's it. So you see, that's it. I know it's a bit complicated and it's a bit new thing than what we do in Angular, but we are actually dealing with a database and we are using a new feature which is on snapshot. That is why it's a bit different, but that's how exactly it works. Now similarly we will do for our add comments as well. Okay, so for adding the comment we have got this here. So you can see it's a basic method where it takes all the details, for example our task ID, our content, and it takes our user object. So it has UID, name and email, which are important. Then we have observable of type document reference. So this is the kind of data this method will return. Okay, so here what we do, we need to add it. So we need to find the collection where we should add. So similarly what we did previously for getting, we found the path which is comments collection and we go to task ID comments like this, what we did here, same, and then we return it. So we use our add doc function. So whenever we want to add a doc, basically in this case it's a comments, right, to a specific doc. So we use our add doc, go to that comment collection, pass all the details like task ID, our content, our author name, and everything such as created at. Perfect. So with this we are done with our service methods. Now we can go and create our new file, which is our comment effects. So here we'll create a new file and we'll call it comments.effects.ts like this. So now inside this we'll manage this full flow. Okay, perfect. So we need two things. One is our load comment effect. Okay, then we need our add comment effect. So we need to have both of these effects. So first let's start with our load comment. So as you can see, the setup is pretty basic. We have got our actions injected, then our store, and then our task service. So on this specific action only, which is our load comment action, when this is dispatched, then only we call our load comment effect. Okay, this one. So we take our switch map, we get the task ID, we use our task service dot get comment method, which we created right now in the task service. Okay, we call that using this task ID and we get all the comments that are from the Firestore. Okay, and then we finally dispatch our success, so which is our load comment success with the updated comments we get from the DB. Okay, if that is not the case, we use our catch error to load the error. Okay, so that is all about load comments. Now we can go and implement our add comment effect. So whenever this action is dispatched from our component, we want to call this effect. Okay, so we take this here and after this we use our with latest from. So we use with latest from like this and we say this dot store and we get our current user. So we get this dot store dot select and we use select user, this one. Okay, now if you remember this select user, this is the one. So here, so we get the details of the selected user. Okay, from here, so we go to our comment again and we use our latest from here, and then after this we get both the data. So we use switch map like this, and then inside this we have our array where we will define both of the details we have. So one is our task ID and other is our content. So content is basically our comment. Okay, so we take this here and after this we pass our user. So this user is basically we are getting from this select user. Okay, and now we open our arrow bracket here and inside this we will write our logic, which is we need to call our add comment service. Okay, so here we'll say return and we'll say this dot task service dot add comment, the method which we created, right? So you can see this add comment, it takes our task ID, it takes our content, and it takes the user object. That is why we use this with latest from to get the user data, and the other data we are getting from this action. Okay, so here we use add comment and inside this we need to pass this data. So task ID you can see we are getting from here. So I'll go to this action again quickly here and you can see this add comment, we are passing our task ID and we are passing our content. So these two things we are getting right from here, basically this action, and our user we getting from here. So let's just pass them directly. So we're taking it using switch map, so we can pass it here. So we'll say task ID, then we pass our content, okay, and the last is our user object. So after this we'll pipe here, so we'll use pipe, okay, open this, and now we can map our data. So here we'll say map, and we'll open our arrow bracket. What we'll do is we'll add a dummy effect here. So we'll just say it basically type, and we will give it like this comments, and we'll say add comment successful, okay, like this. Perfect. And after this we can have our catch error as well. Now I hope you understood this bit, because if you go to our comment section, you remember we did not created any success, so we just used a fake success message here, like action, fake action, that's it. And for the failure we passed it as usual. Okay, so we can see there are some errors here. So to see that, it says type string null is not assignable to type string, so we need to just define our null case here. So we'll just write a condition before this return. So here we'll write a condition, we'll say if user.uid basically or user.email, okay, if none of them exists, if basically any of them doesn't exist, so we put not in front of them, okay, like this, then we would want to do something. So here we'll put question mark like this, okay. So if basically any of them doesn't exist, right, if user.uid or user.email, then we want to return our another action. So we'll say basically return off, and here we'll say inside this return object, and we'll do the same stuff, basically dispatch a fake action here like this. So I'll just copy this from here and I'll paste it, but this one would be, we'll say basically user not logged in, because one of these properties is not available. So we'll say user not logged in, and we do not want to proceed further at this point because either UID or email is not present. So that's it, we'll end our function here. So that's just a basic check, because of that we're getting this error. So now that is also done, and of course so now we need to take this comment effect and register it in our app config. So we'll go in the app config file, okay, and we'll register this effect. So after this user effect we'll have our comments effect, so you can see it's there. And with that, the whole setup for comment is done. Now comes the part to implementing it into our UI. So now let's go to our add edit task component, from where user will be able to add those comments, okay. So now when the user open our model, which is this add edit task component, we need to load and display those comments, right? So let's do that. So in the beginning, where we have our other observables like users, we will also load our comment as well. So we'll say here comments observable, this one, and the data would be basically same observable of type comment array. So here we'll have comment with auth name like this, and this would be array of basically comments, okay, and we need to fill this up. So we'll say this dot store dot select, pretty much same stuff what we do, and we'll say here select comment with auth description, with this one basically select comment with author details, okay. So now our this comment observable is filled with the data from the store, okay. And after this, let's create our new comment variable, the local variable which will bind to our template, so that whenever users add a new comment, we can share the data. Perfect. So now inside our ng on init, we already have a lot of logic. You can see we dispatch our load user action, right? Whenever we get this component initiated, we make our model and we give the whole data. So what we need to do is we also need to dispatch our load comments, because whenever user is opening this model, we need to load all the comments, right? So we'll dispatch our load comment action here. So inside this, if this dot task, if this exists, basically here we will pass our this dispatch action. So we'll say this dot store dot dispatch, and we will say comment actions, okay, dot load comments. We want to load our comment at this point, and to load, you remember we need to pass our task ID. So we'll pass task ID like this. This would be this dot task dot ID, which we are getting from here, okay, task ID. Perfect. So now only with this single line of code, our comments will be loaded here in the component, okay. Now we need to go here and create another method which will be our on add comment, because we also need to allow user to add the comment, right? So we need to create that method which is our on add comment, and inside this we need to pass an action which is our this dot store dot dispatch, and here what do? We pass our comment actions dot our add comment. And if you see inside this, what do we need to pass? We need to pass our task ID, okay, we need to pass our content. So content will be basically our this new comment, okay, which we'll get from the HTML, and task ID we get it from here directly from our task object, okay. So this dot task we get task ID as well. So let's start passing both of them. So we'll have task ID here, this would be equals to this dot task dot ID, okay, and content would be basically our new comment, this one. There we go. So here we are getting the error which is undefined is not assignable to type string. So basically we just need to do a check before passing this at this point. So we'll say if any of this doesn't exist, then we want to return this function straight now. So we'll say return, that's it. But if it is not the case, then only we wanted to add the comment. So like this, we'll add our comment, and as soon as we have added the comment, what do we need to do? We need to make this new comment an empty field again. So we'll say this dot new comment, this would be again an empty field. Perfect. So with that, our add comment method is also done. So now comes the interesting bit, which is actually adding our comment section. So we can go and add the comment and load those comments as well. So this would be after our form. We should be able to see this comment. So after this here, we will have a div class, and this would be showing our comments, okay. So here I already written the code, and as you can see, I've got a comment section basically just showing it only if the task exists, okay. Then we use our comment observable using async pipe, load the comments, easy as that. We also show the length of the comments, and then we use our ng for loop to go over all the comments, okay, and show the details, easy as that. And at the end we use our ng model so that our new comment field, which we have described here, which is this one, is connected, okay, and we can show user whatever comment they are adding, okay, and using our add comment we send it to our backend, and that's it. We load it here in the front end. Perfect. So now if I save it and if we go back to our application here, okay, and if we go to any of the tasks, you can see that we have a beautiful comment section. So I can go here now and I can add a comment. So I can say that, so this is a testing task. So I will say, okay, testers, do it by Monday, okay. And as soon as I click on submit, you can see it says who wrote the comment. So basically a test, right? This is a test user. Also it says the time, also the message. That's beautiful. And now if I go on the other tab where you can see I've got this task, right, this one. So if I go here, you can see the comment is there. It says the comment, the number of comments available, and the name. So here basically this is the manager user, right? So here I will go and add a new comment. For example, see you on Monday. And if I add the comment here like this, then you can see it's here, and at the same time this is also updated. So that's how beautiful it is, and we can go here and add multiple comments, and this would be working perfectly fine. And I can see there is some problem in the UI, and my save button for the comment is getting hidden, so we need to fix that. So I'll go in the UI and do some changes. Okay, so to fix this issue, what I have already done is, you can see we've got the form, right? So inside the form I have put the comment section, okay. So you can see, so inside this form at the end I put this comment section, okay, and this is just before our footer, remember that, so that we have our save and cancel button at the end, okay. That's it. And I have given some SCSS so that it is arranged according to that. So you can get this whole code from the GitHub, okay, all of this code, okay, like this. Perfect. So now we can save all of this data, and we can see that we are getting some errors. So there's an error here on this component. So we'll go here and we'll see why is it like this. So it says here the left side of the chain include null or undefined in its type. So if we make it like this, we can see this error is gone, okay, and all of the errors are gone. So now we can save it, and once we load our data again, and we can see that we have got all of our comments properly, and everything is working as expected. The comments are here. We can go here and add a new comment now easily. So I'll say new comment. Once I click on submit, you can see the comment is added, but my user is getting redirected to the main board. So here inside this, the button basically through which we are submitting this, we need to go and change its type. So this button basically we just need to give it a type, and this would be button. Right now it's submitting the whole form, that's the problem. So once we save it, and now if I go here and if I add a new comment, so whatever, and you see the comment came here with time and we didn't got redirected. Perfect. So we have made it to the final part of this application. Our application is now complete with all the features we need, and now it looks like a real world product, right? So now it's time for the most crucial and important step, which is to make our development project to a production ready application. So first thing which we are going to do is we are going to leave this test mode behind. So if you go here in the rules, so you can see we have got some default rules which allows all the users to read and write. Okay, so I'll take all of these rules and I'll replace it with the rules I have written. Okay, first is our users collection. So we allow them read and write. This is basic. And for the task collection, any user can go and read the task, okay, and they can create their own task. But if it comes to updating or deleting an existing task, right, then we only allow the user whose ID is matching to reporter or his assignee. Then only we allow it, okay. And for the comment sub collection, for all the comments, we allow anyone to read and write, okay, that's fine. Perfect. So these are the rules which I thought I should have. But if you want some more restrictions, then you can make your own set of rules. Okay. After this, I'll just click on publish and these rules should be in impact. Okay. So now let's go to our application and see these rules in action. So here I'll go and this is the test user you can see. Okay. So for this specific test user, I'll create this task. Okay. And I'll call this task as cannot change it. Okay. So basically only for test, and I'll assign it to test. So once I create this task, you can see the task is here. Okay. So now if I go to another tab, which is this one, you can see this is my manager user. Okay. Because for manager, we don't have any task. Okay. You can see. So if I go as a manager and I try to make changes to this task, okay, which is for test. So for example, I try to change it to something, right? So if I go here and if I save changes, you can see with this, none of the changes got implemented. It is still the same, right? I can try again here. You can see I'm filling out the description like this. And when I save it, you can see the task. It doesn't change. It reflects back to its original task. But if I go here on the original test user, and now if I try to change it, okay, changed. And when I click on save changes, you can see that the task changed, because this is the original reporter and even the assignee. Okay. So if you go back here, you can see that, yeah, it has been changed. But now if I go here and because I am the assignee and I am the reporter, so I'll go here and I'll assign this task to manager. Okay. Now if I save the changes, you can see the changes are saved and it's assigned to manager. Okay. So now manager, when you can see his tasks are there, right? So he can go here now and he can say, change it to say like I am the assignee. Okay. Now when he save the changes, you can see it has been changed. And that is how easy it is to change these rules using our Firestore database. Okay. So that is it. We have our full application ready where all the features are working. You can log out, you can log in, you can create new tasks, you can see your own task. You have also these specific rules which allow only you or the reporter, the assignee, to change this task. Okay, not anyone who's logged in can do any changes. Perfect. So we are done with full coding of our application. Now comes the deployment. So before we deploy, we need to create a production build of our Angular app. Okay. So we'll go into our terminal. Okay, here, and we will create a ng build. So you can see we'll run this command, and with this you will be able to see we'll get a build file here, and then we'll take the build file and use that to host our application. Perfect. So you can see we have got this dist file, right? This folder. Inside this we have this build file. So all of this basically browser, third party, and routes.json. So these are the files which get deployed on internet and anyone can see our application. Okay. Okay, so now we can go and deploy our app to the Firebase. So, but before that, make sure that you have Firebase command line tool installed globally. So the command for that is this one, npm install Firebase tools. So use this command to install the Firebase tools, but if it gives any error for some reason, then use sudo in front of it and it should be fine. Now after this, as we are in the root of our application project, which is this one, I'm here. Now I'll do Firebase login. So this is the command. So Firebase login. Okay, so we got this error. So what I did is basically I installed the new node version, which is using this nvm install -lts, and then I'm using it as well now, okay, in this project. So now if I try the Firebase login again, this should work. So let's see. Okay, so for me it says that I'm already logged in, but I need to use a different account, so I'll log out first. So Firebase logout, and now I can try to log in with a different email. So I'll again use Firebase login now. So with this I should be able to log in with the email I want. So here it's asking me if the Gemini needs this feature, so I'll anyways give access yes as well. So make sure to you see all of them as yes, otherwise there could be a problem in routing. So I'll copy this and then I'll paste it here. And here after choosing my account, you can see that Firebase CLI login successful. So now I can close this and I can go back to my terminal, and you can see that success logged in as this. So this is my coding for beginner account and I'm logged in. Okay, perfect. So most of the steps are done. Now comes the final step, which is to initialize our hosting. So we'll use Firebase init hosting like this. So now it will ask us a series of questions. So first, do we have an existing project? Yes. So we will press enter, and then it already locates this application. You can see ngrx Jira clone app. So this one, right? Now here we press our enter again, and then it will start the hosting setup. Okay, so now it asks us another question. What do you want to use as your public directory? So this is the most important step. We need to put the path of our this folder. So you can see inside this we have got this ngrx Jira clone app and we have got this browser. So we need to put this here. So I'll just paste my path. So you can see dist ngrx Jira clone app browser. So this will tell Firebase to deploy the files from the production build, which is this one, the one we created right now. Okay, and you press enter after this. Then it will ask us to configure our URLs. So this one would be yes as well. So write Y, and then set up automatic builds and deploy with GitHub. So for this I'll do no, and then it asks me if I want to override the index.html which already exists. So here make sure that you select no. Okay, once we select no here, then if you press enter, and you can see the Firebase initialization complete. Okay, now we can do the final command where everything will happen, which is our Firebase deploy. So that's it. Now once we press enter, now Firebase will take all of these productions file we have and it will upload them to its global delivery network. And you can see it has already given us a hosting URL. There we go. So now if we copy this and if we go to our tab here and we paste this URL, you can see that we have got our application live and running. Congratulations, we have finally done it. So from a blank folder, we have built a fully deployed secure Jira clone app. Okay, so we'll go here and we will register as a new user. So here I'll say new user and I'll give an email, for example, newyuser@gmail.com. We'll give a password, and when I register, you can see that all the tasks are there and I am successfully logged in. I can do whatever I want here. I can create a new task. So new task, I can write a description, I can assign this task to myself, and I can create, and it is there. Perfect. So we have covered everything in this tutorial, starting from the standalone components. We did a deep dive into ngrx for state management. We included our slices, our selectors, Firebase, authentication, and whatnot. We use Firestore database to manage our collection, sub-collection, okay? And we also use Firebase hosting at the end to host our application on this link. Now you can share this link with your friends, and you can also allow them to use this application. I know this was a really long tutorial, but I sincerely hope you found it valuable. And now you feel confident to building these large-scale applications. And don't worry, I'll link the whole source code into my GitHub, which I will put the link in this video's bio, okay? So make sure to check it out. And if you have made this far and learned something new, please do me a huge favor and hit that like and subscribe button. It really helps the channel grow. And definitely let me know in the comments if you are stuck at any place in this tutorial. I'll try my best to help you out. Thank you so much for watching. Happy coding, and I'll see you in the next one.